It is 5:45 and I call the work session of the Staunton City Council meeting to order. And the first order of business is to welcome Mr. Terry Holmes back, and we are grateful to have him back here.
I feel that way by November.
I don't know how we've survived, 6 weeks without you, but we're glad to have you back.
Like an eternity.
I'm glad to be back.
It's great to have you. All right, I will now consider the agenda.
It's only fitting.
Fitting that
Oh.
Mr. Holmes.
Yeah, that Mr. Holmes, it's the agenda.
Oh. You were the one to read it all the time anyway, so.
Got this?
Nothing.
I mean, go ahead, Terry.
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
Mayor Claffey, I move to approve the work session agenda and the regular meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you. I have a motion to consider the work session and regular meeting agendas as presented. Is there a second?
Alice?
I'll second.
All right, Counselor
It's
Woods.
teamwork.
Thank you. Mr. Kessinger, please call the roll.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood. Aye. Miss Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
I was absent.
Miss Edwards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
You can approve the work agenda. You just can't do the minutes.
Okay.
All right. Okay, let's go to the orientation update on municipal separate water sewer system. Ms. Beauregard.
Sure, we have Pete Kessiker here this evening who will introduce our guest presenter as well. And they have, you have the PowerPoint in front of you, and they will be sharing that presentation this afternoon with you all. So take it away.
Welcome.
And this is a follow-up to what you heard back, I think it was in October as well. So this is a follow-up to that as requested.
So I hope you all have had a chance. First of all, I want to thank you, Mayor Claffey and Council, for giving us some time for a work session. I hope you've had some time to look at this, a lot of information. I'm just going to run through these first few slides for orientation purposes, and then hand it over to Keith Thompson for the kind of the meat of the presentation. And I must say, it's not easy to get things by your clerk of council. He runs a tight ship.
For
You can't
sure.
just throw in here and think you're gonna.
That's right.
Okay. With that, I'm just going to run through some history and some definitions here real quick. Is MS4 is a municipal separate storm sewer system. TMDL is total maximum daily load. BMPs, which we'll be talking about, best management practices. And then the rest is what Mr. Thompson will be covering: TMDL action plan, current status, plan revisions, and recommendations. So the Environmental Division, Programs Division, is basically responsible for all the EPA and DEQ regulatory compliance for MS4, TMDL, erosion sediment control, stormwater management, and then also the stormwater utility fees. We all know Staunton is about 25,000 residents as of 2020, 19 square miles, and then about 13 square miles of urbanized area. So with that, here's our map of the MS4 urbanized area. So in 2013, the city was mandated to develop and implement an MS4 program to comply with the general permit from DEQ. MS4 mandates that the plan be developed and specified 6 control measures, special conditions relative to the Lewis Creek TMDL maximum load per the Chesapeake Bay Act, which requires the TMDL daily load reductions. So here are the 6 categories: public education, public involvement, participation, illicit discharge, construction site runoff, post-construction, and pollution prevention. Housekeeping, which is basically the citywide pollution prevention plans. We'll touch on that. So the public education, mainly as far as our office is concerned, is we go to classrooms. Our environmental health specialist, Willow Hughes, who's here with us this evening, presents at middle schools. And we just hope to, educate people on environmental lifestyles and becoming part of the solution. There are 4 main BMPs, again, school presentations, stormwater webpage, which people can go to. And if you all would like, I mean, you may have already done this, you can go and click on the annual report for last year. And all of these BMPs are reported and our numbers are reported as to how we met these goals. Every year we have to submit that. Stormwater Education Bureau brochures, and then stormwater awareness through social media. There's pictures of, I'll explain that. Public involvement, this provides opportunities for active roles in the program. Again, it's public participation, and that involves tree planting, DEQ, Adopt a Stream, Chesapeake Bay Fund, Adopt a Street program that's mainly through Public Works, the hot water hotline, so people can go on the webpage and submit questions and or concerns. And then our partnerships are mainly with the Lewis Creek Watershed Committee, Friends of Middle River, and Shenandoah Green. And Shenandoah Green was very instrumental last year in the tree planting. I think we planted like 2,400 trees citywide last year, which was really good. Illicit discharge and detection. Basically, this is defined as anything going down the storm drain that's not water. So paints and pesticides and things like that, we try to eliminate. So we have a hazardous waste collection day, which we do in conjunction with Augusta County. The reporting program, fire and rescue has a lot to do with this. Also, Public Works reports anytime that there's a sewer that overflows, and they report that directly to DEQ. They report it to our office so that we can report it in our MS4 report. Mapping of the stormwater network, there's a little example there. You can go into GIS and see where all the storm sewer systems are, and then spill prevention control measures. So we train Public Works, fire department, police department relative to recognizing when they might see illicit discharges going into the storm sewer system. Construction site, basically this is the erosion and sediment control program, trying to control sediment and then other things like pesticides, fertilizers, oils and grease from leaving construction sites. So this involves the erosion and sediment control program, again, with inspections every 14 days, which Will is responsible for. And then the stormwater management program, which enforces the stormwater regulations relative to quantity and quality treatment on site. Post-construction is the stormwater side of it. And so we do, during site plan review, we approve whatever best management practices, be it rain gardens or detention ponds and retention ponds and those kinds of things. And we are responsible then for the maintenance of those. Potentially, basically, we nowadays, we do not approve a plan until we have a maintenance agreement in hand. Unfortunately, a lot of the structures throughout the city, there weren't maintenance agreements. So when we go and inspect, and we're required to inspect 50 a year, we give them the inspection report, send them the maintenance agreement, and hope that they will sign it and become part of the maintenance program. And then we have a database of all the BMPs throughout the city, private and public. Pollution prevention. This is basically all of our facilities throughout the city are required to have a pollution prevention plan. And so street sweeping is part of that. Pollution prevention training. Again, we train all the different departments relative to pollution prevention. The yard debris collection, dedicated vehicle wash areas throughout the city, Public Works, stormwater inspection and maintenance. A SWIP is a stormwater prevention, pollution prevention plan. So each facility has to have one of these plans, and we go annually and check that they're being maintained and that the staff is up to speed on what needs to be done and what needs to be looked at. Then the nutrient management plan, that's basically done by Parks and rec on the ball fields and football fields and such. So I'm going to ask you if you could jot down questions and hold them till the end so we can, I think, get through Keith's and myself. I want to introduce Keith. He's a PE and vice president of the water resources and the water resources group for Wiley Wilson out of the Lynchburg office. And he's played an integral role in the development of the MS4 and TMDL programs for the city since its inception in 2013. He received his civil engineering degree from ODU and wears many hats for Wiley Wilson, including project manager and technical subject matter expert. So he specializes in the MS4 program administration, TMDL implementation, stormwater permitting, stormwater BMP design, and the creation and implementation of stormwater utility fee enterprises. So all of which is a very good thing because most of those topics are what he's going to be touching on this evening.
And I'd also like to thank you for having me here today. This is, I think I've been doing this almost annually since 2013, and it's a great honor to do that. All those accolades he talked about just means I get to kind of bring the bad news to you a little bit, unfortunately. The stormwater is a very challenging subject, and it's a very difficult thing for all communities within Virginia to deal with right now. So definitely don't feel alone in this. All communities are struggling with the same things. Tonight, I'm going to focus a lot on your TMDL action plan. I'll explain a little bit about what that is in a minute. But there's a lot of topics that you can kind of see on this slide that we'll go through. But I have designed this to make sure we try to keep a lot of time at the end so that you guys can talk and ask questions, because I find that that's probably the most useful benefit to this session is just being able to answer some questions. First of all, as part of your MS4 program, you have to deal with what's called the Chesapeake Bay Total Maximum Daily Load reductions. So that is a requirement of it where you are required to limit how much nitrogen, phosphorus, and total suspended solids are being released from your MS4 program into the Chesapeake Bay waters. And when you became a MS4 in 2013, that became part of your responsibility that's tied directly to your permit. During the permit cycles, you have a certain amount that you have to achieve every time. And so these permit cycles are 5 years. From 2013 to 2018, there was, for most localities, there was a 5% reduction required. However, because you were a new community, that 5% was moved into your second permit cycle. So you didn't really have any, you just had some planning time that you had to do there. The second permit cycle is what we're in right now, and that went from 2018 into 2023, end of June this year. During that period, you had to achieve 40% of your total reductions that were required by that program. And so that's where we are now, and I'll update you where we stand right here in a few minutes. And then the third permit cycle begins July of this year and runs through June of 2028. And that's where you have to get that last 60% in. And that's where the real lift comes in. And so coming into this program, part of that first 5-year period, the city tasked us with looking at all the lands that you owned and tried to come up with, based on all the city-owned properties, to find a best management practice that would achieve reduction goals. And so when we did that, we looked at all the different sites and looked at what's the best management structure that we could put in on that facility. And then we looked at what the cost per pound of reductions in nitrogen, phosphorus, and total suspended solids would give us. Our goal with that study was to try to identify what the most cost-effective projects were out there and actually draw a line at what was not cost-effective for you. So coming out of that study drove what this first cycle, the 2018 to 2023, was going to be. And with that, we came up with our 2018 plan. That included a couple of stream restoration projects, which we called them Peyton Creek at the time, but it's the Gypsy Hill Park. That was actually the most beneficial from a dollars per pound removal. So that's why it got prioritized number one. We also looked at some wet pond improvements that we could do at the Green Hills. There was already a project plan for adding some pavers at the wharf. And the Central Avenue Streetscape project had some additional green features in it. We were just going to take advantage of those. You'll see the top line on this is existing load reductions. We wanted to make sure to take advantage of everything you had already done as a community. So that included projects like Lake Tams, which was a great project. One of the bigger things that it actually included was your street sweeping program. You guys did a great job of tracking your street sweeping, knowing how many pounds of debris was removed every year. So we were able to take that pounds and convert it to an actual reduction in each of those categories. And so that was very beneficial going into 2018. Unfortunately, since 2018, there's been a lot of stuff that's happened. First and foremost, COVID. COVID was a huge impact to everybody, and it certainly slowed down the program, slowed down the ability to put out projects and to focus on the TMDL aspects. Another thing that happened specifically here locally is the flooding that you experienced in the 2020 timeframe and since. As we all know, heavy storms are coming in more frequently, causing more flooding. So that refocused your stormwater staff into trying to figure out how to deal with some of that up front. Probably the biggest thing that you'll see on here is the existing load reductions. You notice that went from a very good number to a very mediocre number. The biggest driver of that was that the state kind of moved the goalposts for us. They changed how we can use street sweeping. So being able to take that pounds of removal and then turn that into how much nutrients and how much solids that we were removing, they took away that option. They changed it to a much more restrictive option that was based on lane miles and only specifically lane miles that had curb. If you applied the new rules, that took us from, say, 3,000 pounds of phosphorus all the way down to 421 pounds. So those three things kind of put us to a point where we were really very crippled in what has been done during this cycle. One beneficial thing is all the work that you've done at Western States and removing all that impervious surfaces out there. We have a way of taking advantage of that and garnering credits for that. But what is end up happening is right now, as we're planning, we're looking at a slight negative number in our total phosphorus reductions that you can see there. So even though we were able to add Western State, we've recently added a new stream restoration project near Cole Avenue that are all beneficial, but that doesn't make up the deficits that were really created mostly by that existing load reduction. And so as we finish up our program cycle, it looks like we'll meet our nutrient reductions for nitrogen and total suspended solids, but not phosphorus. We'll be operating at a deficit through this period. Because of that deficit, it's something that we're going to have to think about as we move forward into 2023 into 2028, because that deficit will have to be made up and we still have to get to 100% for the final cycle. So with that, we have been looking at taking some of the projects that were originally intended to happen during the last cycle and moving them forward into this cycle. The real challenge is that even with those projects, we still are looking at a really high level that we need to add to your overall CIP program to meet our reductions. You can see the red negative numbers there. We need to come up with ways to get those deductions between now and 2028. One thing that you can do there is actually use nutrient crediting, which basically means you're purchasing credits in a nutrient bank within your watershed. That is a way that you can attack it, but there are some drawbacks which we can actually talk about here in a second. So to purchase the credits, we have a kind of an example of how you might go about doing the math for that. And so you purchase the credits based on total phosphorus. So we would look at our phosphorus reduction and then multiply that by the cost per pound of phosphorus at one of these nutrient banks. Now, this was a cost that we looked up about 6 months ago. Those costs are variable. Other localities that are in a similar position, they are also looking at these credits. In addition, the development market looks at these credits to help get new projects going. So because they're falling into the same issue, trying to adhere to new regulations. And so when we look at this, it would take about $6 million worth of crediting to get those reductions achieved for the 100% cycle. The other drawback to this is this doesn't do anything to help your local water bodies. And so if you can do these water quality improvements and spend the money locally, you're going to bring an uplift to the ability to to your local streams, your water bodies. So it also helps you to use those better and actually is an enhancement to your community. So, we want to definitely balance the usage of credits with the actual application of the money locally rather than into one of these banks. And so that's part of the process that the stormwater management team is going to need to look forward to as they prepare for this last permit cycle. So as we look at what we need to accomplish over this next period, we do have some recommendations. First and foremost, we need to implement the current TMDL action plan. That means getting our Cole Avenue and our Gypsy Hill Park projects under contract. Technically, we were supposed to have those completed within this permit cycle ending in June 30, but we feel pretty comfortable that they will give us credit for them as long as they're out for bid and we're working on contracts and we have money appropriated. Because of all the delays that have happened due to COVID and other things, we feel like that's a very defensible position. In addition, we recommend going back and doing some additional studies to determine where there might be some cost-effective projects out there. The 2016 projects or study was really just focused on locally owned lands by Staunton. That's very limiting. A lot of times the best projects are going to be on private lands. They're going to be BMPs that have already been built, but that have not been maintained, or they were designed under the old regulations. There are partnership opportunities out there that will be more cost effective for you as a locality to do than to try to do a new BMP on your land that's not well situated for it. So we recommend that there be a study done to identify where those opportunities are. That way you can make sure you're doing projects that have the most cost benefit to you and to the environment as well. We do think you should continue to look at that possible nutrient credit purchase. That is a market that is ebbs and flows. So we want to make sure that you're positioned well in case you do need to use that. And then the last piece kind of falls into how do we pay for this program? If you noticed on my slide a couple before what the program looking forward needs, if we assume crediting, you're looking at somewhere between $11 and $12 million to get to that 100% accreditation. Beyond that, you have stormwater flooding needs that you need to address in the city. That's a whole nother bucket of money that you have. And then the third arm is really how to administer this program. This program is growing. There's more administrative demands on your staff. So there's some growth there that needs to happen. And so with that, we recommend that you look at evaluating your stormwater fund as well. This slide right here is kind of showing you the average cost per residential family per month. What I wanted to show here is just where you are relative to what a lot of other communities within the state are. And you can see you're basically fourth lowest on this chart. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That's representative of the fact that you were early implementers of a stormwater management fee. You set up this management fee back when only the coast was doing it, when they had serious coastal flooding problems. You did it before you were in an MS4 program. Your program's changed mightily since then, so your needs have changed mightily. You can see other communities. I'll point out the city of Waynesboro. They started a fee back in around the 2016 timeframe. They are actually getting fairly close to where these same drivers might drive them to look at their rates. The town of Warrington just started one in 2020 as a result of this same program. Now, you can see that that's a fairly new program, yet they're significantly drawing in more money, more revenue for their program, even though they're a much smaller community than you guys. And so that's just a reference because it's been so long since you've gone back and looked at this fee. It's not a negative, it's just an idea that maybe it's time to start looking at the fee. Here's just some basic statistics that you might see across the state. I compiled these back in 2020 when we were working with Warrington and their program. It gives you a little understanding of just how wide ranging these programs are, how many communities hit it, and the type of communities. This is a little bit more specific for you on this slide. Your fee structure is 18-tier system. That's very unique, not just within the state, but across the country. More typically, what we find is that when there is a tiered system, that tiered system is mostly reserved for your residential community because it makes it easier to explain to your residential community. It also protects them to make sure that you can justifiably push a certain amount of the fee to them, whereas the more the fee goes more to the development side, which is really driving most of the stormwater issues. There's a lot more pavement, a lot more building space, a lot more impact to the stormwater runoff on the non-residential side. So you see more localities on the non-residential side charging per square foot, essentially. The other issue with your current system is that you have crediting that was in place from the very beginning. When you first started your program, you had somebody diligently going out in the field and finding opportunities to give people credit. The challenge with that is there's been no follow-up to make sure that there's been maintenance and that those items are actually effective. And as Pete mentioned earlier, you don't necessarily have the maintenance agreements that you need. Typically, to get a credit, you have to inspect your management practice every year and return that to the city every year so that you can then integrate that information into your MS4 program. It actually helps with the administration. And ultimately, the program is only generating around $700,000 per year, which is well short of what you need to administer all the different things that you're faced with between flooding, TMDL, and just general program administration. And so what we would recommend with the fee study is that, one, you quantify what your actual expenses you're projecting out over the next 5, 10 years. That would include the flood mitigation projects you've looked at. That would include your administrative needs. Do you need additional staff? Do you need additional equipment? It would also look into what this TMDL implementation is. It would look at not just the cost of the TMDL, but how you might finance that so you can get to a more sustainable level so that you don't have to pay outright for every project, but you might be able to look at loans that are low interest through the Virginia Revolving Loan Fund or other opportunities out there. And then I would also recommend looking at your structure. Does the 18-tier structure still make sense? It might be the best way to move forward, but also looking at, okay, how do we apply our crediting? Is it in line with what most people in the state are? I think that's an important part of just understanding what the benefits and detractions are from the current structure so that you know how best to move forward. It may be best just to increase your rate per tier, but it also may make sense to do some structural tweaks while you're doing it. And so, that's something I recommend you as a community do in the near future in order to prepare for that last 100% push to position yourselves well. And so with that, I would like to dedicate the rest of the time for questions that you may have for either of us.
I do have a question, like as far as the suspended solids, like how are the nitrogen and phosphorus measured in our waterways?
So that's an interesting backstory. Effectively, the EPA has a large model that measures the Chesapeake, or that is modeled as the Chesapeake Bay and the migration of nutrients from each of the main watersheds that comes through. That was built on data that, in all honesty, was much closer to the bay. And so each of that data assigns each of the different watersheds, Rappahannock, James River, and Potomac, so on, a different allocation of those nutrients. And it assumes how those nutrients flow down. And so it gives us calculations on how many nutrients that you have in your locality, and then we have to take a calculation to figure out what your required percentage is. So it's not actually based on any actual testing here in town. It's based on that EPA model, and this is really an unfunded federal mandate. The federal government is mandating this on the state, and the state has mandated this on the MS4 communities, as part of their way of adhering to the EPA rule. And so there's a lot into it.
Nebulous.
It is. It's very nebulous, and it's ever moving. They are improving that model year over year. They add additional data to it. A lot of the stuff that you have to do as part of your MS4 program, that database that Pete mentioned, that gets sent to them so they can input that into the model and refine it. But there's still a lot of underlying assumptions that go in there to get to these numbers, for sure.
And that would end with us buying credits.
Potentially, I definitely recommend, if you can at all find a cost-effective approach that keeps the cost very similar to credits, I recommend you do actual projects. The actual projects pour more money into the local economy, and then you have the actual uplift of the water bodies locally, because you also have other potential TMDLs that you're going to deal with in the future. You want to improve that water quality as much as you can. And if there's opportunities, get a little flood abatement out of it too, because really, if you can not do the credits, you can really better the community. Now that's got to be balanced. If I spend twice as much money on the stormwater to do it locally versus the credits, that may not make sense because that's going to draw money from somewhere else. So.
Mr. Robertson.
This is more of an observation than a question, to be honest with you, because the whole thing just angers me, to be honest with you. To me, it sounds like a state and federal sanctioned highway robbery. I mean, I'm just being honest. In other words, if you don't meet our guidelines, fine, I'm gonna let you pay me $6 million, whatever it is, and let you out of state jail.
Yeah, there's a lot of frustration across this impacts 6 states, and there's definitely a lot of people that feel very similar. And it is a very difficult program to adhere to, and to especially if you're a smaller community and more limited assets, or just geographically, you guys have challenges that are unique to you. You know, Virginia, of all the states, seems to have taken one of the better approaches. I know right now Maryland is struggling because they said they were going to do a whole lot quicker. And now they haven't achieved those goals, and they've kind of gotten their hands slapped a little bit. Virginia's been a lot more reasonable about it, and they continue to whittle it down. We're still right now waiting on the new updated recommendations for how we attack that next one. And some of the things they're talking about doing is possibly eliminating the total suspended solids piece of it. Well, that's a great help, especially considering how many total suspended solids we lost in the street sweeping credit. But it is a very difficult thing that you have to overcome and achieve in such a short period of time.
Why was that done?
Well,
Was there a reason? In other words, you're getting ahead. We can't do that.
yes. So what it all boils down to is when the Chesapeake Bay was struggling with the life of the vegetation, life of the oysters and all that kind of stuff, there was a number of environmental groups that went and basically took EPA to court. And this was after years of already improving the bay through some other programs, but basically it was felt that it wasn't moving fast enough. So the EPA was taken to court. The EPA lost that court. And so they have a court mandate to find a way to address this. And so that's where they use the total maximum daily load process to try to fix the issue. The unique thing with this, it was the first of its kind in the country that actually assigned nutrient reduction numbers. Prior to that, if you had a total maximum daily load allowance, you generally were able to do prescriptive things like we'll put in some BMPs, we'll put in fences, we'll put in park cleaning projects, different things like that, tree planting projects, but there wasn't a number attached to it. And what would happen is they would reevaluate it after you did everything you said and decide if you needed to do more. This was unique in that it assigned you have to do this number by this date. And that was driven primarily by that court case. Yes, sir.
A couple of things. One, what happens if you don't qualify? How do they decide how much you pay in?
So that's the big question right now. Because everybody's kind of in the same boat and this is all new, we don't have a real good idea of what the penalty will be, both for the state from EPA and from you to the state. Right now, my educated opinion is this first cycle that we're currently in, if we don't meet it, you're probably going to get some reprimand, and you're probably going to have to add into your program how you're going to achieve these additional credits. But for that final 100%, you are very likely to get some level of fine associated with that. Now, we don't know the magnitude of what that fine might be. For other MS4 program issues for other localities, not related to TMDL, there's been 6-figure penalties that have been assigned. And the thing about penalties, it starts at ground one. If you don't adhere, then they penalize you again and again. It's a tiered enforcement. It kind of starts with a letter stating that you need to comply. If you don't, then they want to enforce more and they start levying fines. And so there is potential that there will be a direct financial, fine to the locality if you do not. There is potential for that even for this first cycle. We just feel like DEQ's position right now is somewhat friendly and understanding, especially with some of the COVID challenges and other things that are out there, that they're most likely just going to go through more of a process of making you up, document how you're going to make up these extra.
Fun. The total phosphorus seems to be our number one concern here locally. What is the primary source?
The primary source of phosphorus a lot of times is linked to like nutrient loading. One of the things that you have is nutrient management plans. So it can be fertilization, different things, but it's also if you develop land, there's a different phosphorus load on developed land, especially lawns that are consistently mowed and different things where you have a degradation of material more frequently than woods, which are more cyclical in nature. There's also phosphoruses that are attached to carbons and different things that are pollutants coming off of vehicles, off of roofs and different things like that. And of course, there's just a baseline phosphorus, a lot of phosphorus and nitrogen attached to animal wastes and things like that. And so the fortunate thing with phosphorus is most of our BMPs are actually really good at attacking that. BMPs that we have with the current technology are not as good at doing nitrogen. Nitrogen is a completely different animal and much harder to deal with. You're actually in a really good position on that because of the Western States project. You can see from that, you get a lot of credit on nitrogen. Doesn't help you at all on phosphorus, but the phosphorus is easier to attack. So.
I have a question. So you said Staunton, we started this in 2016?
So 2013 was the beginning of your MS4 permit cycle. And so that's when we started having to plan for it.
And then 2018 is when this first piece
Yes,
was
this
due.
first 40%. Yes. Well, that you had to start between 2018 and 2023 is that first 40%. Yes.
And what percent were we at?
You are really close. In suspended solids, you're there. In nitrogen, you'll be there after these projects that we have. Phosphorus, you're a little behind. You're about 73 pounds behind. To give it an actual number, I haven't done that math, but I could easily do that for sure.
It's about 1.3 million.
Yeah, so if you wanted to go the credit route to get into compliance for this current permit cycle based on phosphorus, it would be about $1.3 million.
Mr. Holmes?
How do you expect, or how would you suggest that we deal with this with businesses? You said about partnerships. How can we bring them in without freaking them out? You know, because I mean, I already hear so much about stormwater now, and it's
Yes.
just, it's, and
Right. So, the best thing is to look for opportunities for public-private partnerships. As Pete said, there's a lot of BMPs in town that do not have a maintenance agreement, and a lot of them are probably not maintained. If you find those and you can update them to the current regulations and you can get that maintenance in there, then you can get an awful lot of credit because you also can show where they're not effective, and then you bring them up to current standards, you get a lot of credit for that. The best way to go forward with that is to effectively say, us as a locality, we are probably going to make those upgrades ourselves. But to do that and to pay for that, we would like a maintenance agreement. So you get that maintenance agreement in there, and they would have to, you would likely ask them to give you the easement to be able to get in there and do the work. So you would want to do that at a no cost to them, but it's also less costly for you because you're not doing new grading, you're not doing new clearing, you're dealing with something that's already there. So you're just doing an uplift. So the overall cost of the project for you would be less. To the owner would hopefully be none. And the ancillary impact that you get is getting that maintenance agreement that you need for your MS4 program administration.
The upgrade would basically be a lot of the structures in town right now were just designed for quantity treatment to detain the stormwater. The retention basins would put the media in there and create the BMPs that would, absorb the phosphorus and nitrogen. So you'd be basically going in there and rehabbing those existing structures to have media and plant growth in them to accommodate for the nutrient reduction.
Mr. Mayor. All right, crazy idea, crazy statement. First of all, how did we get into the program?
So you get into the program based on the census. And so what happens on every 10-year census, they establish what's called an urbanized area. And as soon as you get into an urbanized area that has a certain population density, the EPA and the state through the EPA, or the state because of the EPA, it determines what MS4 areas need MS4 programs. So because in the 2010 census identified yourselves, the county, and Waynesboro as a dense enough population, any urbanized area within your boundaries became an MS4 area that you needed a permit for. And so that now moves on with you as you move forward. So the 2020 census might change those boundaries a little bit. The 2030 census might change those boundaries a bit as well. What it does do, because you are collectively a smaller community that's been linked by multiple, you're what's called a phase 2 community. That's the small MS4 program. So you have a more generalized permit, whereas the larger permit holders would have 100,000 people or more. They have an individual permit that has to be negotiated directly with DEQ every 5 years. So that's usually a much more onerous permit package.
So the next question is there's no way to tell the DEQ or tell the any other department of state to, take a hike? You can't, can you get out of it? Because 1.3 million, we could probably find a lot better use for some of our citizens.
Right. And that's exactly, unfortunately, you can't, because these triggers have been made and you have these permits that you have to operate, very similar to your water plant and other facilities like that in order to continue to operate. And that's one good thing about having a stormwater fee. You're able to have a revenue generation source that is equitable relative to who has the biggest impact on the stormwater, while not impacting your general fund as much. Some people use their stormwater fund and their general fund to dually promote these. Some are actually having to pay for them straight out of the general fund. So one way to protect those other assets through the general fund is to make sure that you have enough funding coming through the generation of this stormwater fee that's appropriate for all your various needs.
Could you explain the 18-tier system and whether we should adjust our system?
So, the 18-tier system, what it does is it creates a tier from a square footage perspective. And each tier has a range of square footages that you fall into, which is very convenient for people to be able to understand, especially on the residential side. Oh, I've got a 5,000 square foot house with a 5,000 square foot roof. If they see that they fall into that tier, it's very intuitive, which is why a lot of times we do recommend on the residential side, you go to it. And I'm not sure the background of when you actually applied or implemented this program. I wasn't here at the time, but your program took the same approach all the way through every size of building. And so every facility's impervious area falls into one of those categories. So that automatically puts you into that category. Now, most localities don't go with that on the non-residential side, because you don't necessarily need that intuitiveness in understanding the program. And if you have a lot of facilities that fall near the upper ends of those, it's actually dampening the amount of fee you can generate, because the fee generation on each of those categories is basically an average across that number. And so if you tend to get businesses and square footages that are near the top, that's a potential lost revenue. And so it may be working perfectly here without a full and rigorous study of it to understand where all the different parcels are falling. We can't fully understand what the impacts would be if you did go to a non-tiered system, but there's always a suspicion that there may be something going on there that's actually can push more of the responsibility to the residential side than is due. And that's part of what you want to do. You want to be equitable between the two sources. Most residents don't have a lot of impervious area relative to the size of their lots. Most businesses have a lot of impervious area relative to the size of their lots. So they create more stormwater that needs to be dealt with.
Things like rain barrels and stuff like that connect keep them from having so much runoff?
Yes, absolutely. And that's part of looking at that crediting side, is you'd want to evaluate what types of BMPs are allowed to get credits. That's one of the things, like when the early implementation, I understand that somebody went out and basically looked for any opportunity to give a credit, which is what you wanted to do to be good stewards at the time before you had all these drivers. Well, the thing about a rain barrel is a lot of times people have great intentions the first year or the first couple of years, and then after they disconnect it for the winter, the next couple of years, they don't put it back in. And so you'd want to have a more systematic approach to whether or not you wanted each BMP, because if you have a BMP like that you're allowing credit, you're also creating a demand on your staff to go check and make sure that's in place and correct. So it's balancing those type of things and making sure that somebody who doesn't have a feature or is not working isn't getting a credit, while not also pushing too much to your staff, because that will drive up costs on the administrative side.
I know that the restoration has worked, because there for the longest time, I wasn't able to get crabs from the Chesapeake Bay. I
Yes.
wasn't able to get oysters. I wasn't
Right.
able to get rockfish.
Better
So
now.
it really has worked.
Yes, the initial, I mean, even the initial phases have created so much uplift. I mean, really relative to the TMDL program, most of the uplift we're seeing is really the stuff that was done before that. And this has kind of taken us across the finish line, so to speak, relative to the Bay. But it is certainly a challenge to confine it to such a short period of time.
So you talked about the street sweeping. That was kind of the most negative thing that's impacted Staunton.
That is probably the single biggest thing you can point to from a crediting perspective, because even though there were some projects you decided not to do, you put other projects in their place. So you would have been in a good position had it not been for extreme reduction on the street sweeping side.
And we've got
they
basically
reduced
5
that.
years to come up with $11 million to get up to par. Is that what you're saying? Or will that change in 5 years? In 5 years, will we have to come up with more money
So, you
to
know,
take
the
care of new things?
the typical
Moving
life of
target.
these total maximum daily loads is that you reevaluate it at the end, once everybody has done what they're supposed to, and see if you still need it. And so there is potential that that finish line will move again. Or what is also likely is that the other TMDLs that you have in your watershed, right now, you don't have requirements in some of them because the TMDL was created before you were the MS4 permit holder. Well, the next time they go back and review that, you are a permit holder. So now you'll have other issues relative to Lewis Creek or other things that you may have to do. These things that you're doing for the Bay can apply to improving those as well. And you can take credit in both of them if they're appropriate type BMPs. So another reason to try to focus on what we can do cost effectively versus just defaulting to crediting.
Sir, can we go back to street sweeping for just a second? Did you
Sure.
all understand what you were saying? Because it sounded sort of counterintuitive. So street sweeping is actually an unproductive strategy,
No, it's-
or
It's less productive than it was initially.
They moved the
they-
goalpost.
Yeah, so
It's
effectively,
still good because it's taking the trash off the streets, which
Yes.
end up in the
Right.
creek.
right, and there's still a benefit from it, and it's something that you would do anyway.
anyway, yeah.
The issue is that
Right, we're not getting as much credit.
the way you were crediting it before, you had a really simple way based on weight to track it. Now, not only can you not use the weight to track it, the actual credit derived from the lane miles you're doing is lower, and you have to come up with a new system to actually track those lane miles in a given year. Because that's something that in Pete's report, he has to put in there every year. We did so many lane miles of street sweeping. So when you do a program like this, you have to make sure to put your threshold low enough down so that you know you'll never fail to miss it if you have a street sweeper breakdown or something like that.
Now,
So it sounds like we either
Go
gotta
ahead,
come up
Brady.
with more projects. or we-
okay, so I now the help to the Bay, and that has definitely been working. And we're doing stream restorations and a lot of projects along those that are going to be part of flood control as well. Are you aware, like of any communities, because it sounds like these numbers were come up with a little arbitrarily,
Little bit, yes.
at the end. And so we're chasing a target that was created, kind of strangely, it feels like. Are you aware of any communities appealing that target
There's been
successfully?
there's been a lot of talk about it across communities and across states. And through the discussions, even with organizations like the Virginia Municipal Stormwater Association and different things. And to date, nobody has gotten to the point where they felt it was a viable course of action to where they wouldn't just be wasting their efforts and money to do that. They felt they've decided against actual litigation in those cases.
So it's hard to prove against the numbers.
Yes, correct. There's enough data that what's in the Bay is a fairly accurate depiction. The piece that's not a depiction is how those nutrients
What percentage of it is ours?
how it transmits down the riverine environments to the actual Bay.
Mr. Kesker, is there any possibility that we can inform the civilian population
Mhm. Yeah,
of our dilemmas?
yeah.
And
Kind of-
I have no idea where I stand on the 18th tier, and I I would know. And is there a difference between what Counselor Darby and Counselor Robertson and Counselor Wood, are we paying different rates on our bill?
Potentially, it's based on your impervious area. So the first runs, I believe, from 0 square feet to like 3,400. So at that square footage, you're paying $3.20 a month. When you go from 34 to, I think,
Pete, can you go to the mic, please? I'm sorry. We've got people online.
when you go from 34 to 42, then you go to the next tier and you'll be paying $6.40 a month. And the 18 tiers multiply as you go up. So, you know, the rationale is that Walmart is paying for $30,000 worth of, or 30,000 square feet of impervious. And so
Right.
their rate, I think is, you know, some of the business men are paying $30,000 a year relative to their impervious, but that's how it's structured. But what Keith is saying is versus other localities, and correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, that have structured it such that the residential side pays more of this kind of a tiered rate, whereas the commercial side, they change the structure to where, since they are contributing potentially more phosphorus and nitrogen based on more vehicles and lots and such, their tier and their fee is higher. Is that?
And it's not even necessarily higher, it's just an equitability issue. You would actually measure their actual impervious and charge them per either square foot or per what we call equivalent residential unit. So you come to a nominal number that you can divide every one by, and they would get charged one credit per, you know, for that. So what it does is make sure it's fully equitable for each one of them and making sure there's not an undue influence or undue reliance on the residential side so much. But again, you could also do that across the board. Or we could find that the 18 tier system works just fine. You know, what I would envision as your first step of study is to figure out what your needs are with all those different areas, flooding, TMDL, and overall administration. I would look at the structure of it and then figure out how that is impacting things. Then if you find that the 18 tier system might have some flaws, then you can either look at a different structure that you may want to approve, or you could treat it like a lot of folks do when they go to develop a new one. You could actually create an action committee out of a cross section of local citizens, business owners, that kind of thing, and use that committee to help drive decision making. There would be two real ways to do that. But I think the first step would be to study to see if there might be value in that structural analysis. You know, it could be with the structure, all you find that needs to be done is to address how you're handling your crediting. If that's all you need to do, that's a relatively simple fix that can be done and implemented over a 12-month period without a lot of detailed discussions to figure out what the right system is, because that's just doing what you already have in place, but doing it more correctly. But if you find that there may be some value out of going from an 18-tier system to a different system, then you want to look at what all the different system setups or most common system setups would do for you and how that would affect your revenue generation.
Pete, do you have any recommendations based on, you know, you probably know more about this than all of us put together, and tell us, do you have any feelings one way or the other, what we should do?
Relative to the fee structure?
Yes.
Well, again, as Keith has stated, we were one of the first localities to implement it. And it's for the majority of the residents, $3.20 a month, which is $38 a year. I mean, people spend more than that on coffee in a week. So, I mean, when you put it in relative terms, they've been paying very little for us to try, and particularly with the way the climate is changing, whether why or how it is changing. And if we want to try to do any flood mitigation in the city, along with my challenge is to try to figure out flood mitigation projects and BMPs that will also help us gain their credits. And it's a fine line to doing it. A lot of people think that their stormwater fee, you know, I got calls, why did it flood? Why did we flood all, 4 feet of water in the wharf in 2020? What are my stormwater fees for? And so, that's a legitimate, I guess, question, but they don't understand that those fees are basically in place for the MS4 and for the nutrient credit program. So it just depends. I mean, you could potentially with Staunton set up a whole separate fee structure and fee just for stormwater, for a flood mitigation. So here's our flood mitigation pot. Here's our nutrient credit pot. It's a thought. If people want to try to reduce the flooding in Staunton, that's what it's going to take. But again, as I've told people, you could put every known stormwater structure, known demand in place in Stanton, every BMP, and we get 7 inches of rain in an hour and a half like we did in 2020, we're still gonna have 3 feet of water in the water.
Right.
Because we're in the floodplain. So we're in a tough spot.
It seems like we need to put together that Venn diagram of, flood mitigation and the stuff that'll help this and hit those projects first. I mean, do we have any idea of like a specific list of things that we could do where we could hit these targets and not have to pay 1.3 million? Or whatever, 11 in the end and all.
Yeah, but this year, 1.3.
Process
Yeah.
control.
Right now, as Keith has stated, we're hoping that in this permit period, which ends June 30th, that relative to the challenges we faced, the flooding in Stanton is unique to Stanton, but the COVID issues, our prioritization of funding and projects based on that we're not going to probably face a fee or a fine for not meeting those credits and wouldn't necessarily have to buy those credits this permit cycle. And so hopefully we can avoid this 1.3. As far as the next permit cycle, when we have to meet the next 60% in 2028, that's a different animal.
Is it a realistic goal to put together a list that'll keep us,
Well, yeah, that's part of what we want to reprioritize as far as a study on private properties that we can potentially go to the private commercial and mainly commercial and redo some of their existing stormwater structures so that we can get credit. And potentially we might pick up enough of those to meet our goals.
Right. And, when we did the first study, we would have had to have
Just got
done
one
every
question.
project
One question.
on that first list that you kind of have a sheet of. But very few of those were actually what I would say from a cost per pound perspective viable. We've pretty much exhausted those projects that were viable projects in this first 40%. And that's why it's really important to start looking beyond the city bound property lines and look at ways that we can look at private opportunities, whether it's more stream restoration or whether it's upgrading existing BMPs and that kind of thing. Because most of the time those already in place measures are in the areas we need to be that have a lot of impervious areas. So you end up getting a lot of benefit from them.
All right, last question.
Pete, just a simple answer, just so the citizens and I know too, when you talk about impervious and Walmart having 30,000, you're talking about roof and like
Parking lot.
parking lots, that
concrete.
type of things, things where the water
Right,
won't
a
go.
lot of people would get calls from residents, and like, why am I gravel driveway being counted as impervious? It's impervious in that it's compacted. Vehicles are driving over it every day and parking on it. It compacts the soil, it becomes impervious. So gravel also counts.
I didn't want to hear that.
Is there, I'm sorry, is there any money out there, grants, anything that are available for us to achieve some of this, some matching funds or anything?
Yes, and there are grants that are through the state approved on a budget by budget cycle. And right now we actually have an application in to get a matching grant for the Cole Avenue project. And that's something we certainly keep in mind. There's also opportunities through the Virginia Revolving Loan Fund and other loan funds, which allow you to stretch these costs out and actually keep a pretty low interest rate, which is how, if you do look at refee or restructure, you would want to find a way to phase that out so that you can keep a consistent fee as long as possible. So definitely some opportunities.
Well, not to repeat myself, but you're saying that in the next 5 years, we really need to spend roughly $11 million to bring us up to code.
Yes, based on the amount of study that we've done to date, that's the range that we're looking at. And that's just on the stormwater phosphorus, nitrogen, TSS side. That's not even touching your flood issues really. Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen, for ruining our night.
Yeah, that was a way to start.
I'll be outside later if you want to throw stuff at me.
Yeah, well, I remember the last time we went through this, it was a similar feeling. I walked away going, oh, boy. So thank you for keep us updated. And this is very serious matter that we need to continue to follow. So
Okay.
thank you for your
Thank you all.
time.
Thank you all for your time.
And we are well behind time. Ms. Beauregard, we're up to the discussion of proposed fiscal 24-28 capital improvement plan.
Sure. So Jesse Myers, our CFO, will take us through this again. This is the second discussion we've had on the capital budget since it was brought to you, I think, last month, a few meetings ago. So I'll let her walk through it and then we'll open the floor to any questions you have.
Welcome. Sorry,
Thank you. That
sorry
was-
we were late.
That was kind of depressing.
Yes, it was.
Especially for a finance director.
I know, I'm back there going, oh
My God, where are we gonna find that?
Okay, so we're back tonight to talk about the 24-28 CIP. It was introduced to you at the January 12th meeting, and it was approved by the Planning Commission at their January 19th meeting. The session will allow for further discussion about the plan now that you've had time to hopefully read through it. We'll bring the plan back to you at a later time for your actual approval. So it's just for discussion, so please let me know if you have any questions as we go through the slides. We have some staff members here this evening that are available to answer questions about their particular project, should questions come up. The 5-year plan is $66,417,479. And that's broken out between 15.8 for the general fund. The water fund is about 25.5 million. Sewer fund is 8.8 million. Stormwater is in there at 3.6. Parking lot is 2.1 and schools is about 10.5 million.
Stormwater's a little low.
Yes, it is. So the next few slides are the slides with the color coding, and this is our general fund. This top section or the first section is what's known as our reserves, and they should look familiar to you. These are not specific projects, but more of a way to save up for things that we need to do in the future. The only new one on here is the IT equipment reserve there at the bottom. And that's because some of the IT equipment requests, pieces of equipment can cost around $200,000. And if you have a couple of those needed in 1 year, it's very lopsided. So the equipment reserve will allow us to fund that evenly over the plan instead of having multiple things come due at one time. It's not going to start until FY26 because we have particular items in 24 and 25 that we have in the plan. So on the next slide, you can see the specific projects that are in the general fund. The first section with the purple shading is suggested to be funded with the carryover funds, and it includes the pump house, some renovations there for $225,000, replacement of the CAD system. That total project is $850,000, and we have that proposed funding over 3 different fiscal years. Moxie Stadium, currently we have estimated the construction cost at 1.8 spread over 3 fiscal years to save up for that. The replacement of core network router, that is an IT request at 200,000, and then dog park lights at 100,000. And then the next section in the orange is our annual CIP planning. Most of that was up top in the reserve section, but there are a few projects that are here in this section, and that's the cluster hardware for IT, the core network firewall replacement, that's an IT piece of equipment, and then extending the fiber throughout Montgomery Hall Park for 100,000. The library study is in there at 65,000, and then an extra 90,000 for the Gypsy Hill bathrooms. The last cost estimate I got was a little bit higher than what we had in reserves already. And then 160,000 for that Montgomery Hall Park practice field lights. The next 2 lines are for the Churchville pedestrian corridor improvements. This is not going to be new funding. We're going to use our reserves, the reserves that we have in the sidewalk line, the bike and pedestrian line. And we also have some leftover money from the Central Avenue streetscape that we'll put toward this project. And then we're also hoping that maybe we can get some of the VDOT revenue sharing money. And then the next 3 projects are VDOT funded projects where we're the fiscal agent. So I'm showing them in here, but they're funded by VDOT. The next slide is an overview of the CIP needs for the water fund. As you can see, well, go into the next one, Kylie. This is just the color coding of the funding sources. So as you can see, there's some significant needs over the next few years. The repainting of the Franklin Hill and the Shutterley Mill tanks is planned in FY24. This is painting of the tanks inside and out. The Richmond Avenue pipeline replacement is a significant project that's broken down into multiple phases. The two projects at the Staunton Crossing are in the plan with hopes that the city will receive at least partial funding through the state grant for these. And the most significant water park project by far in our future is the North River pipeline replacement. We have pushed the design for that phase of this project out to FY '28. Currently, a funding source has not been identified, and that's why it's undetermined. More than likely, it's going to take bonds to get that done in the future.
That's from Richmond.
The next slide summarizes the sewer fund CIP. The 5-year plan focuses on Commerce Road, Staunton Crossing, and Lewis Creek. As you know, the city was lucky enough to receive state grant funding for the Staunton Crossing. This is excellent news, as this will free up the sewer fund balance to cover the Commerce Road and the Lewis Creek sanitary lines. And we may even have enough to do a good portion of the Uniontown once that plan has been developed and we're put into action. Slide 11 is an overview of the stormwater CIP. The TBD in the funding column is due to the fact we're waiting to hear back from possible grant funding on coal and I believe Gypsy. The Gypsy Hill project is currently in the budget amendment to be funded with ARPA. If we ended up getting grant funding for that, then we'll reappropriate the other half of the funds, because that's a 50-50 grant. So hopefully we can get help on coal and Gypsy, and that way we can use that fund balance for the next project or two. The parking CIP is just maintenance related projects. We do not have the new parking arms in here at this time because they're $250,000 each. And the parking fund just does not have the funds to pay for those at this time. And staff would like time to do a thorough study of our parking to make sure that that is the right financial decision to make to spend the money on those arms and what the payback period would be on that. And the last slide provides an overview of the school CIP. Most of these are their typical reserve type of lines. The technology reserve has been increased to help schools keep up with the replacement of Chromebooks and teacher laptops that were purchased with COVID-related money. And their most significant project is the Shelburne renovation in the operations facility. That number there is for phase 1 and 2, which they have just about covered. They may need like $1 million more of that, which they might be able to get from their fund balance. And that concludes my review, and we can take questions at this time.
I don't have a question for you, but I do for Mr. Johnson.
Why do I bother to sit over here?
It's just- the water fund. I know you've told us before, but just again, since the North River is being pushed out even further, can you say that the water supply for the city with Gardner Springs is secure?
Yes,
Yes.
so right now, Gardner Springs is capable of producing all the water that the city of Staunton needs through a much shorter pipeline to our water treatment plant. So the issue of Gardner Springs is not capacity. The capacity is already there. What our Gardner Springs project is doing is giving us the reliability that it will always be there with the emergency generators and the floodplain and mitigating all those risks. So yes, we are pushing the North River Pipeline well past its 100th birthday to start that project. But again, we monitor that line closely. There have not been a lot of problems on it, but certainly as Gardner Springs comes to fruition, our risk profile will certainly justify pushing that out to 28.
On the, I don't know if I need to have Mr. Tuttle come up here and talk about Moxie Stadium renovation, but there is a meeting scheduled tomorrow with Mary Baldwin University. And we want to find out how much they're willing to help us out on this, because the usage is currently weighted heavily towards Mary Baldwin, and they approximately, are using more than 50% of the use. So we don't want to give up our baseball field, but at the same time, if they're going to use our baseball field more than 50% of the time, we think there's going to be some funding required from them. So we're prepared to talk this over tomorrow with, that in mind. So I don't see us spending that kind of money ourselves as a city. I'm sure you're going to tell us a little bit about, we don't want to give up control.
We don't, I don't. So there's 4 partners at the stadium. You've got the high school, Staunton Braves, Mary Baldwin, and our youth American Legion team, Babe Ruth team. That's there.
Yeah.
Mary Baldwin's the only one that has 2 seasons. They have a fall season and a spring season. Braves are there all summer. So the high school fits in right they kind of overlap with Mary Baldwin and are finishing right when the Braves are coming into town. So controls is an issue for me. But there's a lot of usage out there.
And there's need at the field, without a doubt. I mean, the field has not been remodeled in many years. And it's
the last time the field itself was remodeled was in the early 90s when we sodded the infield, put irrigation in probably 5 years later, late 90s. That's basically it. Facilities, the structures around are original, 70 plus years old. Dugouts are inadequate. They're not usable.
matter of fact, the dugouts have been filled with gravel.
They have, we
because
did.
They flood so
They
often.
flood and they stay full of water. So I've been with the city 34 years. It's been an issue since day one when I came. So, and that's not going away.
Right.
And it's not urgent. I mean, this is, when I initially put this in the CIP, it was to give it a place that if I'm gone, that is slowly working its way to get completed.
We're not going to let you go until you finish the field.
Well, give me the green light and I'll hang in there.
All right, good, good. But all right, I just wanted to bring it up that, I do not look at this as a guaranteed $1.8 million expenditure. This is something that's holding some spots there on this, but we got to get some help if we're going to get this field refurbished.
We should talk to the Braves too.
We will. And, it's a little early. They're not around yet.
Yeah, exactly. But
But no, we're definitely interested in that.
everybody that uses the field.
And then if we're gonna, if we're gonna use this for Happy Birthday USA, I mean, it would be nice if we had safer, more accessible field, better facilities, but that's in the future.
Is there any way that we could prioritize what needs to be done there? Maybe we can do some things and not do it all at once.
That's why we've, on the ARPA money, we've approved the fund to study it, to come up with that very plan. So that's the part we're trying to get done in the short run so that we can figure out the best way to proceed.
Maybe we could take it off of our water credits.
Well,
If we could only drain the dugouts.
So I can tell you the urgent needs are the facilities behind that encompass the field. The field's in relatively good shape. It needs some work in the right field. It's got a pretty significant slope out in right field and then some cosmetic things. Lights are fairly new. I wouldn't recommend changing that. And that's a big ticket item.
But they
Moving the
are inside
fences.
the field line.
They are. We can move. The fences are kind of exaggerated distance from the playing surface. The backstop is way from home plate is too far. Has been that way forever. So originally in my mind, it's everything you're looking at from home plate back and the seating. We're not ADA accessible. Restrooms in the original structure were closed years ago. There's a concession in there that needs major work. It's constant maintenance headache, and it's just lived its life. It served its purpose for 70 years, but the time's coming, or in the future, it's going to have to be addressed at some point.
Thank you. Questions from council?
I think we should go out and buy some lottery tickets. This is, I still haven't gotten over the money spent for the water.
Yeah. Jesse, I have a question. Under the stormwater fund, the SHS stream restoration, is that listed anywhere in the school CIP as well?
No, it is not in the school ICP. It's in the
It's-
cities.
It's just all city responsibility. Okay.
That's behind the,
It's right adjacent
Football.
to the
Behind the old football.
school property, right? I was just,
where Mountain View Drive comes around. So what all needs to be done there?
I'll let Pete speak to that.
That's been a vision for a long time, but basically it'll be a stream restoration, which similar with Cole Avenue, that's a different type of stream restoration because the sanitary sewer runs there and there's a multiple things we're doing. Gypsy Hill and the high school will be as much an educational feature when it's finished as anything. So they'll create floodplain within that stream, lay the stream back, put riparian buffers in, native plants, and then there'll be pathways and walkways through it for education classes at the high school. And then the park will have the same kind of features. Yeah.
Will these two give us very many credits?
Yes, yes. Gypsy Hill Park ranks relatively high. I'm not sure we've done analysis on the Staunton Stream Resto yet, the high school.
I just don't want to have to buy credits. I think that's a waste of money.
I agree.
And, you know, it's just kicking the ball down the road.
I mean, I'll stick my foot in my mouth. I don't care. If, as Pete said, if the school is going to possibly be using the stream, the walkways for classes, you know, my next question, why can't the school have have some monies in that project? Now, granted, it's all our money anyway, but still, they can budget some of that. I'm just asking the question, Jesse. And Pete, I mean.
Well, and potentially we would hope to get grant funding on that one too, 50% match. So, but yeah, I see what you're saying. It's not my call.
Who would get the tax credit? Where does that come to? Back to the city? If you were to
The
get
credit,
the credits,
the-
for-
Oh, the-
nutrient
The
credit.
nutrient credits, that would go towards the city's MS4.
Okay. It wouldn't affect anything. Yeah.
I'm
questions?
thinking,
No, but thank you for bringing up the Moxie Stadium question. I'd like to
Well,
see some partnership on that.
We're interested in tomorrow's meeting. See how that
That would
goes.
be interesting.
Questions?
I'm just wondering how much money that we can put into stormwater now to try to alleviate having to pay down the road, because I mean, that's just money you just throwing up in the air and see where it lands. Dodge that bullet.
And that's why we suggested using ARPA funds for the Gypsy Hill project to give us,
Mhm.
because the stormwater, it doesn't have enough funds to do Cole Avenue and Gypsy Hill and then the
Mm.
next project. So if we can get help on at least the Cole Avenue, at least half, and then fund the Gypsy Hill out of ARPA, that will free up the fund balance to help with the next project.
Well, is Cole, is that ready to go in this year?
It's a 23 project,
Yeah.
yes.
I don't have any other questions.
Further questions?
Like I said.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I call this meeting
Mhm,
on break until 7:30.
mhm.
Good evening. I call the February 9th meeting to order at 7:30. If you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And tonight's invocation is being presented to us by the Vice Mayor.
Good evening. Actually, I have asked Mr. John Hartless, long time, maybe lifelong resident of the city of Staunton, if he would do a Christian invocation for us this evening, and he agreed, which I'm pleased to have him here. So if you would like to participate, please join us.
Welcome.
Mr. Hartless.
Yes, thank you. If you'd like to join me in lifting up a prayer, please bow your heads for a moment. Father, we just thank you for all the great blessings that you bestow on us undeservedly, unasked for, but you care enough for us to do that. We thank you. We thank you for the council members, the city officials, the support staff who have a burden on their heart to serve this community that we love so much. And Father, we just pray that tonight your presence will be felt in all the discussions that take place, that they'll be done, excuse me, that the discussions will be done civilly, with honor, and Father, with an understanding truly that everyone who's here physically or electronically are here because they have a desire for this city to continue to grow, prosper, and expand. And Father, we just are grateful for that. We ask for your presence as we go about that, to always keep in mind that the ultimate desire of all of us is for the city to be enriched. We lift our prayer tonight in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to the mayor's report, and well, let's talk real estate assessments. Everyone on council has had numerous citizens' concerns this week about the mail they've gotten. And please read your mail carefully and notice the line on the top of your assessment says, "This is not a tax bill." But let's just go over this couple of steps that are involved, and hopefully it will allay some fears. There are 3 steps involved. Step number 1 is the assessment. State law mandates all cities in Virginia to reassess all properties at least every 2 years. Some cities have annual reviews and increases. City council does not have any control over this process or any involvement in this step. Some facts to consider. Staunton and Waynesboro are both on a 2-year cycle. So they have not had a reassessment since January 1 of 2021. This year, both have residential assessment increases of 29%. So therefore, we are not alone in our pain. Our fellows in Waynesboro are doing the exact same thing we are. Cities with annual assessments would include Harrisonburg, which raised theirs 14.3% on an annual basis. So do the math, and if they do the same thing for 2 years, they're right there with us. Charlottesville had a 12.3% increase, and Lexington, right down the road, had an 18.3% increase on an annual basis. Step number 2 is setting the tax rate. Council does control this. Currently, we are set at 92 cents on $100 of value. Once the assessment is established, then the rate is determined to cover city expenses. We are required by law to have a balanced budget. So we must determine what the expenses are going to be for the city next year in order to compute what the tax rate is going to be needed to cover it. Real estate taxes provide the majority of the city tax revenues. So we have already begun the budget season. We've asked the departments for their needs, and we have prepared a capital improvement plan. This is not to be confused with last month's meeting, the second meeting of the month, where we had a discussion of ARPA funds. ARPA funds are a COVID-related program designed to stimulate and repair local infrastructure with federal funds, not Staunton city citizens' tax dollars. So we approved almost $9 million worth of ARPA funds that we are separate from what is going to be in the Staunton city budget last month. Council is tasked with finding sufficient local tax dollars to fund routine expenses such as education, our school system, police, fire, city services, and to pay city salaries. We cannot use ARPA funds to finance these expenses because the ARPA funds are just a one-time only deal and they will not be here in the future. So therefore, we have been told not to use these for routine payroll or personnel matters. Therefore, we are now in the process of building a budget for the city for fiscal year 24, which begins on July 1st of this year. We will set the tax rate no later than April 27th. We have a pretty busy season set up for council, including weekly meetings, either work sessions or regular meetings, all the way through April, starting the end of March, actually. So there will be a lot of discussion, but please don't get overly concerned about the tax bill that you see on your assessment, because like we said, it is not a tax bill. It is just based on what you would pay if the tax rate was to remain the same. I am here to assure everyone in this room the tax rate will not remain the same. We will be able to drive it down. How far down depends on what Ms. Beauregard and Jesse Moyers comes up with. So that's to be determined, and that's what we're going to work on for the next 6 weeks. Step number 3, by May 1st, the treasurer receives the tax rate that we have approved. They multiply the tax rate by the assessed value that you got on your house this week and sends you a bill in May for your taxes that will be due on June 20th. So in the meantime, please understand if your assessment is abnormally high, you may want to contact the assessor's office to discuss it and debate it. But the average residents in the city of Staunton received a 29% increase. So therefore, understand that we're all in the same boat together. So we're working on it. Please be patient. There's lots to study. We'll work to lower Staunton's tax rate as much as possible. And we feel your pain because we're experiencing it as much as you all are. Thank you. I'll turn it over for additional members by members of council.
Mr. Mayor.
Vice Mayor Darby.
I just wanted to share with folks that this week I attended the Lewis Creek Watershed Advisory Committee meeting and the Central Shenandoah Planning District Committee meeting. Found both to be very informative, interesting, and look forward to going back in the future to both of those committees.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Robertson.
I, on behalf of the nominations committee, would like to put forward the nominations committee, their recommendations for nominations to lots of different committees. We kind of cleaned the list up and pretty much have caught up. There's a few that later on this year that'll be coming up, but we feel pretty good. There's one committee that we're still, we have been trying and trying to get a youth nominee, a junior, a senior from Staunton High or to represent the youth of this city on that committee now for 2.5 years. And we haven't had any luck. So if any of y'all have any sons, daughters, grandchildren that fit that category, please talk to them. We would love to talk to them. And I think it would be something that that would be an amazing thing that they could put on their resume. But I mean, something they also could learn about how things work. So without further ado, here is the nominations from the nominations committee. Nominations committee met on February 1st, 2023, and would like to make the following motions. To appoint Joe Sprangle to the Economic Development Authority to fill the unexpired term of Norman Butch Smiley, ending January 31st, 2026. To appoint William Dodd to the Economic Development Authority to fill the unexpired term of Joseph Lay, ending January 31st, 2026. To appoint Daniel Hanson to the Planning Commission to fill the unexpired term of somebody named Brad Arrowwood, ending December 31st, 2023. To appoint Bradley Lyle to the Youth Commission to fill the unexpired term of Erica Bischoff, ending June 30th, 2023. To reappoint Maggie Reagan to the Shenandoah Valley Airport Commission for a 3-year term beginning March 1st, 2023 and ending February 28th, 2026. To reappoint Jeff Ramsey to the Tourism Advisory Board for a 3-year term beginning January 1st, 2023 and ending December 31st, 2025. To reappoint Bart McDowell to the Landscape Advisory Board for a 3-year term beginning January 1st, 2023 and ending December 31st, 2025. To reappoint Kevin Spitzer to the Cable Television Commission for a 3-year term beginning January 1st, 2023 and ending December 31st, 2025. To reappoint Aaron Trovato to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee for a 2-year term beginning January 1st, 2023 and ending December 31st, 2024. To reappoint Travis Kaysen to the Recreational Advisory Commission for a 3-year term beginning January 1st, 2023 and ending December 31st, 2025. To reappoint Allison Denby and Ronald Garber to the Economic Development Authority for a 4-year term beginning February the 1st, 2023 and ending January 31st, 2027. To reappoint Jessica Robinson to the Planning Commission for a 4-year term beginning March 1st, 2023 and ending February the 28th, 2027. To reappoint Frank Hurd and Jerry Sifford to the Lewis Creek Watershed Advisory Committee for a 3-year term beginning March 1st, 2023 and ending February the 28th, 2026. To reappoint Philip Lacey to the Board of Building Code Appeals for a 5-year term beginning March 1st, 2023 and ending February 28th, 2028. And that concludes the report.
Well, thank you, the members of the nominating committee. Alice Woods, you've been quite busy already. And
Long meeting.
Vice Mayor Amy Darby and Mark, thank you very much. This coming out of committee does not require a second, but it does require us to vote on it. So, Mr. Kesker, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Ms. Edwards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. We want to thank all those people for all the service they do to help the city out. We really appreciate that. And since I used to be on this, I'm feeling a little bad that I left that much to be done, but it's good to see all these new people stepping up. That's great. Thank you. All right, next item, additional members by members of council. Anything?
No, sir.
All right. Approval of minutes. We can't do that.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the, let me see,
January 26th
January
26th work session as printed
and regular meeting.
and regular meeting of January 26th as well, 2023, as printed.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Counselor Edwards. Any discussion? Mr. Kesker.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
I was absent.
Ms. Edwards,
Aye. Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And that brings us to our regular meeting. Item A is staff recognition of John Brown. I turn this over to John Blair, who is taking over for Leslie Bogard, who had to leave sick tonight. So,
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I'd first ask that our treasurer, Mr. Johnson, come forward, and after he's done with his remarks, we'll have a certificate to present to Mr. Brown.
John Brown served, retired after 24 years of service to the City of Staunton Treasurer's Office, of which the last 16 years that I'm both grateful and proud were with me in my office. He served with distinction through those years alongside his recent retirees who are also here this evening. Through courses in continual professional development, John received a designation as a Master Governmental Deputy Treasurer in 2003, and in the office while handling transactions and interactions that it can be times be challenging. John always conducted himself with professionalism, common courtesy, and with a good nature that people naturally gravitated to. And if I had $1 for each time I heard, "Where's the guy that used to sit in that chair? We really like him," we could balance the budget tonight and we can all go home. It has been my honor and pleasure to have worked with the gentleman you recognize here tonight. Thank you.
All right, and before Mr. Brown comes up to say something, I would like to read this certificate of appreciation and present it to him. And it simply reads, "The City of Staunton, Virginia presents this certificate of appreciation to John H. Brown. In appreciation of your contributions to the betterment of the City of Staunton, the city hereby awards this honor for over 24 years of outstanding Deputy Treasurer service to the leaders, employees, and the citizens of the City of Staunton." Mr. Brown, thank you so much.
Words, please.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to thank City Council and thank my coworkers and my boss for putting up with me for the last 24 years. I mean, to be here at this point in my life now, it's a real difference and a real change. I do miss a lot of my people that I did see, and that's the biggest thing I miss with. And when you come to work every day, you know, and you love what you do, you don't really work. You come there just to enjoy yourself and enjoy life. But thank everyone, appreciate it. I really appreciate the award and the acceptance of this. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Mr. Brown,
We want a picture.
would you mind having a picture with some of the counselors?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
All right.
All of the council.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you'll send it.
Struggling with my city phone.
Oh, no.
All right. Next item is a public hearing and introduction of an ordinance to amend the 2023 budget ordinance for the city of Stanton by adding budget amendment number 5. Mr. Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We will have Jesse Moyers, our Chief Financial Officer, present this item.
Good evening again. I'm introducing budget amendment number 5. It is a city-only budget amendment, and it does require a public hearing, which was properly advertised on February 2nd. The purpose of this particular amendment is mainly to appropriate the ARPA funds, along with a few budget amendments that did not make it into budget amendment number 4. In the general fund, there's a true up to the local health department budget of a negative 11,901. The additional appropriation of 50,000 for the West End Small Area Plan. And then the next line in the general fund is just correcting the appropriation of the Uniontown Small Area Plan. It was originally appropriated in the water fund, but it needs to be in the general fund. And then next is the appropriation of the ARPA funds in the amount of $7,508,326 for the CIP fund for the following projects. $480,000 to pave Montgomery Hall Park, and $400,000 for both the Gypsy Hill and the Montgomery Hall Park bathroom refreshes, or bathhouses, sorry, refresh. $300,000 for the Montgomery Hall Park bathrooms, $200,000 for the Moxie Field design, $375,000 for the library roof, $2 million for 2 fire pumpers, $300,000 for 2 public works dump trucks, $776,000 for Staunton's share of the design and relocation of the regional animal shelter, $2,277,326 for the JDR courthouse relocation expenses, and $400,000 for building security improvements. In the Community Development Fund is an appropriation of an additional $5,000 for the Brownfields Assessment Grant. And in the Water Fund, you'll see the negative $75,000 for the Uniontown appropriation. That's the other side of what I mentioned earlier, the general fund. There's an appropriation in the Environmental Fund of $965,000 This is for the refuse standardization and the recycling center location, both funded with ARPA funding. And then lastly, in the stormwater appropriation is $1.2 million of ARPA funds for the Gypsy Hill stream restoration. And the city manager recommended that you conduct the public hearing at this time, and I can also take questions.
Any questions by member of the council first?
Well, I just after our meeting with the stormwater people, I wonder if we maybe could change some of these appropriations. I don't know if it's already too late or what, but I mean, them talking about $11 million in the next 5 years, that's a lot of money. And that's a lot of money for us to try to come up with. And we're already talking about taxes and we're talking about raised water fees. I don't know if that would be something that could be done.
The only bad part about that is it's the time constraints, because we have to have it encumbered by December 2024, to spent by December 2026, and we're really going to be pushing it to get the Gypsy Hill Park stream restoration done. So I feel like any other project that's not even in the design phase yet will not meet those timelines.
Wasn't the Cole
Avenue is one that if we end up getting DEQ funding on both of these, I'll come back to you to reappropriate this money, and maybe it could go toward our share of Cole Avenue, and then we'll have both those projects completely covered. But yeah, that is one that we're very close to hearing about that funding, but haven't quite heard yet.
Mr. Mayor, Terry, and I really feel strongly that as the city manager answered in the email this morning, having those two trucks basically gets us back on an even keel. We were blessed that we received almost $13 million in ARPA funds that we're not going to get again. And having that extra $2 million for those two trucks basically gives the city fresh new fire equipment. It gets it, because that's it, it's now up to a 3-year lead time, and having it so where they can then start applying that $350,000 every year for years to come, hopefully, which is then when they do need a truck, we will have most of that money there. Right now, we don't have
I'm
it.
not opposed to giving them a truck, but two trucks, that's $2 million. And we're looking at $11 million that we're going to be putting towards this, plus the however much money we're going to spend toward a new courthouse for the juvenile court. I mean, we got a lot of things going out, and we don't have the money to borrow money for these projects, and that's the thing that I kind of worry about. I mean, because I know you're going to cut taxes. So if you're going to cut taxes, where are we going to get this money? It's not like the government's going to give us any more. And that's what I worry about, because I don't want finance to start out with a deficit like we did last year. I mean, we covered it, but we were lucky that we were able to cover it, and I just worry about those kind of things.
Yes, you can respond.
Well, the fire truck reserve is in a negative right now. And by the time we're up to 2026, when we could possibly fund another one, and if it's a 2-year lead time, then we're going to put it out to 2028 before we could get it here. And with the 3-year lead time, our trucks are going to be 18 years old and 26 years old by the time the replacements show up. So that's why we felt that was a good use of ARPA funding to get us back on track.
And the other thing, Terry, is that during the meeting, I remember Chief Garber made a real statement. He said, the one truck is on its last leg, literally on its last leg. And the other truck, he said, I don't know why it's still running.
Well, the newer truck was in the shop that night.
Yeah. So, if one of those trucks goes down, either one or both, then how do we look at the citizens and say, I'm sorry your house burnt, but we've got to at least look out for that infrastructure type of thing. We've got to try to take care of that.
Well, I'm just worried that we're going to if we give them that money, that's truck, and then we cut taxes, and we're not gonna have money to pay for the things that we have to do. I don't want to be buying credits for, because we got too much nitrogen or too much potassium in our discharge. Because that's money that's just, that's throwing away, what was it, $1.6 million, $1.3 million?
1.3.
I mean, we can't, I mean, that's money
Agreed,
you.
Terry, but the ARPA money cannot be utilized for the phosphorus credits.
No, but it can be utilized to fix the stream, or, it can be utilized for those kind of projects.
Correct.
I would like to hop in with clarification, Mark. I think with the 2 trucks, there was the one that was the 2000 model that was definitely, I have no question in my mind that one needs to go. The other one was a 2008 with about 1/5 the usage on it, and based on an average of 5,000 to 6,000 miles that we put on them a year. When I looked at the numbers, I thought that it looked like it had plenty of years left in it. My understanding is it's going to be used as a reserve, and we'll keep on using it that way. But Chief Carver also said that he felt that newer ones didn't last as long, which I don't have any personal information on.
Well, normally a fire truck lasts anywhere from 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
10 if it's been heavily used, 20 if it has moderately been used.
I think we can extrapolate an expected life based on engine hours and mileage and usage on that. And I would love to know why we feel that the newer one will not last as long as the other.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask the chief to come up and
That'd be wonderful.
this?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Welcome.
Thank you. What questions can I answer for you?
Well, I did want to be sure I still had it right. It was the 08 you intended to keep as a reserve, the third.
The 2018, or excuse me, the 2008 model that
Yes,
was out of service last meeting,
Yes.
still out of service. It has been out of service 77 days out of the past 365 days, which is 21%. That's a complete failure. That should not be tolerated. The 2000 model has to run in its place. Like I said, it's on its last leg. It's to the point that the safety of our firefighters and the safety of our community is at a critical crossroads. If we run out of a piece of fire apparatus, we're going to have to brown up Station 2. I don't
Do
think
what?
any brown out, close it. I don't have fire apparatus to put in it.
Chief Garber, where do they get repaired at? Where do you have to take them somewhere special, or does somebody come to your shop and work on them there? Or what?
We have to send them out to be repaired. They are very computerized. We don't have that technology. Simple things we can work on, but not sure where you got your average of 10 to 20 years. That depends on the manufacturer, where it's run at. I can tell you cities that wear a piece of apparatus out in 3 years. 3 years, it's in the dump because it is wore completely out. We don't have that run volume, but our run volume is getting there more and more every single day.
Chief, you typically keep 3 of these.
Correct.
Which one are you going to keep?
The 2008 model would, or excuse me, the 2013 model would become our reserve engine. The 2 new ones would be frontline.
Okay, 2013. Okay, so both of the ones that we're talking about would
be replaced. Yes.
Okay, I thought one of them was going to be
And would you
reserved.
be able to sell them or do anything like that with them? Or?
Because of the ARPA money that's out and the manufacturers building so many new trucks, the used fire apparatus market has kind of tanked. It's not where it used to be because everybody's buying new trucks. These apparatus, yeah, they're very expensive. I understand that. But 8 months ago, this same pumper was only $700,000. Build time was 8 to 9 months. Now we're at $1 million and it's getting ready to go back up again. I was just told motor prices, the price for the motor that drives the vehicle is going up $50,000 because of the government, EPA emissions.
Are they
taxes.
diesel?
They're diesel. That's the only thing that we can pretty much run. There are electric trucks out there, but there's only 2 in the United States. And one I don't know much about. The other has been a complete disaster.
That the one in LA?
Yes. So,
Chief Garber, can you please tell us, why do you think that your calls have gone up so much. Because again, we talked about the population hasn't really soared all that much in Stanton. It stays about even. Is there something happening where folks are relying on the fire department?
So we're not just the fire department.
Okay,
We are what we consider our all hazards department. You
okay,
have the person that's a tenant in the first floor apartment. They have water leaking in their ceiling fixture at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mhm.
They can't get a plumber. The landlord's not picking up the phone. Who do they call? They call 911. We get sent to that incident. We don't run those as emergency incidents, but we go and we take care of that problem. We are problem solvers. Right now, very good example of what's going on, earthquake in Turkey. A lot of our brothers and sisters from Fairfax County are over there now working in Fairfax County. That's what we do. That we are trained to do that same work. They're over there doing that work. We are problem solvers. Our trucks are toolboxes. They're a hardware store on wheels. We carry everything. They're heavy, they're large, but we have to have that specialized equipment to get the job done. And it's what our citizens expect.
Chief, don't you also respond pretty much to a great deal of first aid calls? I mean, you first out there.
Correct. We respond to all life-threatening medical incidents, which can include up to a cardiac arrest to somebody fell and needs assistance getting up. We carry the equipment to do that. That takes up a large amount of space on our apparatus now too, because that is so specialized. But national average for departments, about 75% of their run volume is EMS related. Ours is only 65%. So we're still below the national average for that. Last meeting, I brought that up. 2021, we did about almost 3,900 responses. 2022, we did 4,300. That's right at an 11% increase. But the good news about that is our response time decreased about 10%. So we're getting to our calls quicker, which is good for the citizen and the person needing our assistance.
Chief, one thing I would have liked to have asked you this, separately ahead of the meeting, and I'm sorry to hit
That's
you
no
on the thing, but okay, so a lot of the calls have nothing to do with actually running out and fighting a fire, you're saying. So would a lot of them fit into the category that you could have a certain amount of equipment in a different type of vehicle?
So we used to do that 20 years ago. And that's why we used to do that 20 years ago, because that was the model 20 years ago. It takes a lot for us to do that right now. I need 15 people, 2 sport utility vehicles, and I have no room to put them.
Oh, you mean like 15 people per call?
No, 15 people to run that program.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So they would be separate than the regular firefighters?
Correct. We staff our apparatus at 4-person minimum, and that's a safety requirement. And I'm not going below that. I believe the city manager would back me up with that. We cannot go below that.
Right.
It's a safety issue.
As she said, and I don't know if you read this, but
Yeah.
in other words, if they get out there with 4 people in an SUV and
It
they're
would be
working,
2
and then
people,
or
2
2 people in an SUV or 2, and then all of a sudden they get a major fire call, they can't respond in an SUV. They got to go back to the building,
That's
pick up
true.
the fire
Get their
truck.
protective clothing,
I
or
grasp that.
very simply, they're driving down the road and come up on it. They can't do anything. They don't have the equipment to handle that. They don't have their proper PPE. What you're talking about, the city of Charlottesville tried about, and Mr. Blair may be able to maybe jump in with this one if he's familiar with it, but Chief Baxter, who was a fire chief at the time in Charlottesville, called me and said, hey, we're looking about doing this. We know you all used to do it. And I warned him of it. And they did it, and it only lasted about 6 months. Their response times increased. They have 3 fire stations. They were only running this special unit from 1 fire station. Response times went up. Fire situations kind of got in the middle, and it was not a very good program. Larger departments that have a lot of staffing, and I'll use the city of Houston, for example, which is the 2nd largest fire department in the United States, does that because they have the people to do it. And it comes down to having the people to do it.
Are you short-staffed now?
We are not, you mean short-staffed as in positions?
Yes.
No, we are full-staffed.
Chief Garber, can you tell me how you work with the rescue squad?
Work with them every day.
So
Very
they
good.
they respond to the
Absolutely,
same?
100%.
Okay.
Very good working relationship.
Most of the time, they're there before the rescue squad.
And one of the reasons we run these type, their call volumes double what ours is, but they also run it onto Augusta County for a large part of territory. So they are much more busier than what we are. So that's the reason we do what we do.
Thank you.
Thank you. We got to get on. We have a public hearing to have on this
Thank you,
matter
Chief
as well.
Garber.
Don't run off.
Yeah.
But let me get to this public hearing portion. In a minute, I will open up the public hearing. It is a time the council sets aside to hear from citizens and others about this specific topic. We ask you that you give your name, your address, and then keep your remarks in 5 minutes or less. When you reach the 5-minute limit, we will let you know so that your time limit has expired. For our Zoom participants, please raise your hand now if you wish to speak on this particular public hearing. If you raise your hand during this public hearing, you will also be able to raise your hand later during the matters from the public section. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes as well. Once everyone who wishes to speak has had an opportunity, I will then close the public hearing. With this,
Mr. Mayor, before you do that, we do need somebody to formally make a motion.
very good. Ready?
Mayor Claffey?
Yes. Vice
I
Mayor.
move to introduce an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2023 budget by adding budget amendment. Is that the right motion, Mr. Blair?
Yes, first one.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to start over. I move to introduce an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2023 budget by adding budget amendment number 5 totaling $9,716,425 and that council conduct a public hearing of the ordinance.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Gary Holmes is second. At this point,
He would call.
call the roll.
Miss Edwards,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Miss Woods,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. So at this point, I'm going to open the public hearing. When I bang the gavel, the public hearing is open. Please come to the podium to speak. Mr. Kesker, is anyone on the Zoom line?
No, sir.
Anyone wish to speak? You evidently did all your speaking. All right. So at this point, we're ready for the vote.
No, this is just the introduction. You will vote on the final matter in 2 weeks.
Very good. All right. Thank you. That brings us to our next item, which is a public hearing and consideration of amendments to Staunton City Code regulations on open burning. Mr. Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would ask that Perry Weller, our Deputy Fire Marshal, present this item to council tonight.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, member of council.
Evening.
Good evening.
This is a continuation of what we started back in August of 2022, when we first brought up about updating the city's open burning ordinance. After that meeting, since we had approval to move forward, we had to submit our proposed changes to the statewide air pollution control board for approval, which took several months. In November, we received word via letter that they approved those changes. So now we bring it back to you all for any consideration and for the public hearing to accept the proposed changes to the ordinance and just move it forward from there.
Questions from council? I have one.
Yes, sir.
In the event that we were to ever sell Staunton crossings and we were to clean off major portions of the woodlands that are out there for development, would a special use permit be granted by yourself or the fire chief for them to burn residue or construction, or would that not be allowed under this?
I don't recall what the current zoning for that area is. So under the new one, if it was under the industrial or ag forestal district, then it could be possibly considered. I do know that by them working on the current road project, a lot of that vegetation has already been removed. And so it's even less than it was before. Now, if they did, I guess we could make some amendments. Again, any amendments that we make to what's proposed would have to go back to the State Air Pollution Control Board for further, but I think it all depends on what the zoning is. So we could do some rezoning of it to allow for it.
But is there any capability for you and Chief Garber to grant yeah, yes.
I don't think that wording's in, Mr. Blair, please.
No, there would not be that authority.
So should that be included based on the fact that we could theoretically, hopefully have a opportunity that to maybe clean major, I mean, I know we're going to be more than 500 feet away from the nearest residence because there's nothing out there for 200 and
It's occupied buildings, so it depends on where you're at in relation to the Commonwealth Center.
Well, exactly, but I'm
Right.
sure they could move it to a spot that would be far
True,
enough
that is true.
away.
Yeah.
But I'm just concerned that I don't want to set up another regulation that's going to restrict development. We know we're going to have to develop Staunton Crossing. We know we're going to have to clean some stuff up. We know we're going to have construction debris and the like. And we're out there with 275 acres to deal with, and we're going to cost the city additional funds by making them move all of that to the dump where we would have to pay at the
All
dump
right.
for.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Now, on that same tangent, and the chief and they're probably going, oh, no. On the same tangent, I'm thinking about, I know several of us, we talked about that perceived idea that the city of Staunton is a pain in the royal rear to work with, for even private, to build homes, to build businesses, to build anything in the city. So I'm thinking, what if, because I know that right now they got to clean up a certain parcel of land, or they've got other things that they like to burn or whatever. And right now they've got to load them up, take them out to the landfill, pay whatever that costs, it's just costing them money. What would happen if they could burn that stuff with a permit or something on that piece of property as they're getting ready to build?
Well,
It's just
like any construction project. It's an expense that is added into when they bid on the project. So therefore it looks like it's a burden upon them, but in essence, it's passed on, right? So if they bid, like I know I've got to get an incinerator or I've got to haul this off, they've already built that into their cost when they bid on the project. Staunton Crossing is currently hauling the stuff away. Haven't heard any complaints about them having to haul it away. Just for numbers' sake, since I've taken over overseeing this program since 2013, we've only issued 20 commercial burn permits. So that's an average of 2 per year. So it's not like we do it frequently or have a lot of requests. One of the last ones that came across my desk, the contractor asked if we required a pit and for an incinerator, because he already had his own, because he know other localities already require that.
Okay. All right.
But my question is, if you only are doing 2 a year, if we pass this set of rules, we will no longer even be allowed to grant a permit for 2 a year.
Oh, no, it depends on where it's happening at. It's all based off of the zoning and where it's located.
Well, and let's also be clear. If we're talking though about the development activity, they can still apply for a permit for, and this would apply to Staunton Crossing as well. They can still apply for the permit if they have the incinerator or the trench and follow those portions of the regulations.
Correct. as long as it meets the zoning requirements that we had established in there.
Do most independent contractors have burning permits? How much do they cost?
Cost like buying one new.
For a contractor to have one?
For
to
a
have one?
contractor, the incinerators start at $35,000 and go up.
No, the permit. You said the permit.
No, I'm sorry,
Isn't
the
that what you
permit,
said?
No.
the
Oh, I'm
permit is
sorry.
only $100. And it's good, right? Currently, it's good for 90 days. So they have a 90-day window in order to try to get the control burned in. So,
Very quickly, I was just going to comment on the special permit or whatever is, it gets into a slippery slope with that if I do it for so-and-so, then I'm going to have to do it for this person. Or if we don't, then they're going to say, well, why'd you do it for them, and back and forth. And I don't think we want to, Mr. Blair says it's not permissible, but I would just caution of going down that slippery slope with that.
And I understand the 500 feet from a residence or, an occupied building, that makes a total sense. But I'm thinking that we have some wide open spaces still in Staunton, even though not as many as we used to.
well, if you think one of the biggest control burns that was permitted and met all the current standards, one of the ones we had the most complaints on was up and behind the villages. It just so happened the wind shifted, blew all the ash back towards the city. So we had all complaints from right there on Greenville Avenue, all the way up past, I think it was all the way back to Evers, the old Evers building. So it was quite a wide area. So by increasing some of those distances, we were hoping to try to eliminate some of those ashes. And with the incinerator makes the fire burn hotter. And it also eliminates, helps cut down the amount of smoke and ash that's produced while they're burning. So that's kind of why we were throwing that in there to help reduce those types of incidents.
Well, and you also couldn't have like asbestos or any of that kind of stuff in there.
No, it's all just sawn wood.
Right. Any further questions? All right, I need a motion.
Or you would do the public hearing now on this?
You gotta have a motion for the public hearing.
Have to have a motion for the
Okay.
public hearing, don't I?
Is,
Mayor Claffey?
Yes.
I move that city council adopt the fire prevention related and compliance and enforcement ordinances as presented.
no.
There's nothing there
no.
about the public
Right, the
hearing.
public hearing does it. In this one, you would just open the public hearing.
I will now open the public hearing, so if you wish to speak, please approach. We will alternate between individuals physically present and those with their hands raised versus the Zoom platform. Public hearing is open. Would anyone like to speak? Mr. Kesker, is there anyone on Zoom line?
No, sir.
Going once? All these firemen, nobody wants to speak about fire?
About a fire.
Come on, guys. All right, the public hearing is over. Now entertain a motion.
Well, the vice mayor said it. I'll second it.
There you go. I'm not saying it again.
Motion has been made and second. Mr. Kesker, please call a roll.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Miss Edwards,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. Next, public hearing number 3. And consideration of request by Whitney S. Jordan for a special use permit. Mr. Blair.
Mr. Mayor, I'll have Mr. Rodney Rhodes, Senior Planner, introduce this item.
Thank you, gentlemen.
This place is clearing out quick.
Is it me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Rodney stands up and everybody leaves.
Good evening, Mayor Claffey, City Council members. It's a pleasure to be here. Whitney Jordan is requesting a special use permit for the property located at 2234 West Beverly Street to construct 3 new residential apartment units in the existing building. The building has been used for retail on the ground floor with 1 residential unit on the 2nd floor. I understand that it's been vacant for quite some time though, but it was most recently used for commercial. Ms. Jordan is now the new owner of the property, and she would like to build 3 new residential units on the ground floor while retaining the by right unit on the second floor. The property is zone B2 General Business District, which requires a special use permit for residential use on the ground or basement levels. Zoning, the surrounding zoning of this property to the north, which is across West Beverly Street, is zone B2 General Business District and has been developed with a gas station and convenience store. But zoning to the south, east, and west, so that's on both sides, and behind it is zone residential, and all of them have been developed with single-family dwellings. The City of Staunton, Virginia Comprehensive Plan 2018 to 2040 Future Land Use Map designates this area as commercial. I would note that it also designates the houses behind it as commercial. So that may be something that we need to address with the next comprehensive plan update. However, the use of the building for residential purposes appears to be more compatible with the immediate area surrounding the property. The issuance of a special use permit will help facilitate the development of 3 additional dwelling units and the redevelopment of an underutilized property in the city's west end, both of which are supported by the comprehensive plan. At its January 19, 2023 meeting, the Plan Commission conducted a public hearing. No one spoke in opposition to the request, and on a 4-0 vote, the commission voted to recommend approval of this special use permit with the condition that the ground floor of the structure may be used for no more than 3 residential units. I'd be glad to take any questions you have at this time or after you conduct the public hearing. I would note that we sent out notices to all the adjoining property owners and advertised in the local paper in accordance with state code requirements, and we have not received any comments or questions about this request.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Well, I'm away. Give a question. I know a few years back with some business associates that I had, we had purchased a building that we were thinking about doing. I'm just kind of curious what the answer would be. We were going to look at actually having a business on the ground floor, putting an apartment or home above on the second floor. And of course, the rules and the standards said that it had to be special, drywall and stuff, whatever, because of, I reckon, fire block. My question is it the same reversed? In other words, do you have to have some kind of fire block from the business on the, the opposite? You're going to have ground floor is going to be homes or apartments, and then you got a business above. Is the same standards or no?
Well, I'm not the building official. It is my understanding that this is a change in use under the building code, so they will have to apply for a building permits and meet the building code requirements.
Okay.
I don't believe, since it's the same use for the entire building, that you have that separation requirement, but
Okay.
I'm not positive on that, sir.
Okay. All right.
So I was listening to Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
They're using it all for residential now.
That's the request.
Okay.
Oh, I thought I misread that. I'm sorry. I thought it was a business above.
No.
Yeah,
No.
I drove, I came up in planning commission. I'm the liaison to the planning commission. So when it came up, one of the concerns was the parking, pulling into the parking in the front. So I thought, well, I'm just going to go and check out this, what it looks like and try to pull into the parking and see what it looks like. It looks like a business that was made into a house. So it kind of looks like a house with 2 wings on either side, very small, but so it looks like a house business. It's very strange. I would very much like to see this person renovate this establishment and create 3 new, certainly no more than the 3 because they're quite small. But it really could use some love, and I'm glad that Ms. Jordan wants to put that love into it. And I found that the parking situation would not be a problem. I thought pulling back out onto West Beverly would be a danger, but there was plenty of space and time, and I think it's terrific.
If I could address the parking.
Yeah.
We do not allow that type of parking now for a commercial use or for multifamily use.
Mhm.
However, this is an existing parking lot. And it is what it is, and that could be continued to be utilized as a parking lot for the change in use.
You don't allow what the kind of parking lot where you have to back out onto a street?
That's correct. We only allow that for single family dwellings.
But there was a sort of a parking space to the side of the structure as well.
There
That
are
looked like.
There are some parking spaces to the side.
Mhm.
Our zoning code requires 2 parking spaces per apartment unit. And this would have a total of 4 units, 3 on the first floor.
Yeah.
So you're looking at a total of 8 required spaces. I don't think, due to the sizes of these apartments, I don't think you're going to have 8 cars there on a routine basis. So hopefully, a lot of them can park off to the side of the building. We have better ingress and egress from West Beverly Street.
Any other questions from council? All right, now open the public hearings. If you wish to speak, please approach the podium. We will alternate between individuals physically present, and those having their hands raised versus the Zoom platform. Public hearing is open.
I'm a local real estate agent, and so recognizing that we needed, yes, they are pretty small units, or will be eventually, but we need affordable housing. So
Exactly.
just trying to fulfill a need. And I did actually meet with an architect, Pat Katz, and we've already discussed sort of firewalls and that type of thing. So we've got that.
Perfect.
Do you have any other questions?
Just wondering if you have a timeline for.
Like to see somebody in there by summertime.
Wonderful.
Awesome, excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Done 5 or 6 renovation properties. So I have my group of contractors and we're ready.
Got your team.
So when you said small, how many, what you looking at, single family? Single?
So one will be like under 600 square feet on the left side. Then there will be a middle one, which is about 850 square feet. And then the right-hand side is another small one, 550, 600 square feet. They're going to be nice. They're going to be small, but they all have their own entrances and parking spots.
Would those be considered, I mean, 400 or 500 would consider like efficiencies or type thing? or-
Yes, for
Yeah.
sure. On the left-hand side, I'm going to hopefully have 2 bedrooms in both the middle and the right-hand side, because they are already broken up that way, or the right-hand side is. So I think we'll have two bedrooms and then an efficiency on the left side.
And the upstairs is already an apartment.
It is, yes.
Terrific.
Very good. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Good luck.
Thanks for the development. Mr. Kesker, anyone?
No, sir.
Anyone else wish to speak? Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I'm Wilson Faber. I'm also a real estate agent, and I want to speak in favor of the project. There is definitely a need for what is proposed for small apartments. I'm glad to see that Ms. Jordan is taking this initiative to do this and provide housing in the city of Staunton. So I'd like to speak in favor of the project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Mr. Kesker?
No, sir.
I declare the public hearing is over. I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor Claffey,
Councilor Holmes.
I move the council adopt the resolution and approve the special use permit with the conditions as recommended by the planning commission.
I'll second.
Motion has been made and second. Very good. Mr. Kesker, please call roll.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Miss Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Miss Edwards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Good.
Hey. You will.
We're getting faster. All right, that
let's
brings us
go.
to a public hearing, consideration of amendment to chapter 18.120. Mr. Blair.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Rhodes will present this item as well.
Welcome back.
Thank you. The zoning code requires that all residential accessory structures and buildings
to be located in a side or rear yard and prohibits the structures in a front yard. And this is generally a good zoning practice, but not all lots are created equal, and there are some unique situations. And we received a request from the owners of 1824 East Spring Hill Road to place an in-ground swimming pool in an area that the code defines as a front yard. I believe the owners of this property would consider that their side yard. But the code defines the front yard as a yard extending across the full width of the lot between the nearest principal building and the front lot line, which is the public street. The subject property is located 1,700 feet from the public street, and the house is oriented towards the extremely long private driveway rather than the public streets. In this case, the zoning code appears to unnecessarily restrict the utilization of the property. So staff worked on a code amendment, and before you tonight is an amendment, and it does 4 things. For one, it clarifies that all structures and buildings shall be subject to the area regulations, such as setbacks and lot coverage. It adds an exception that allows accessory buildings or structures in a front yard when the accessory building or structure is located at least 400 feet from the public right of way. It also does a couple housekeeping issues. It replaces the word terrace with deck, and it adds an exception for generators and mechanical equipment to be exempt from the setback requirements. And the Plan Commission at its January 19th, 2023 meeting conducted a public hearing. No one spoke in opposition to the request, and on a 4-0 vote, the commission voted to recommend approval of the amendment. I would note that once again, we advertised this amendment in the local paper and have not received any questions or comments about this proposed amendment. And this certainly would benefit numerous properties along Spring Hill Road. And we also found some on East Beverly, a group of properties that it could benefit from this amendment. And there may be other properties throughout the city that could benefit from this.
Questions from council?
Are we doing this on a case-by-case basis or is this?
No, this would be by right if you had 400 feet of front yard.
And will they be required, since it's a swimming pool, to put a fence around it?
That's a requirement under the building code. Yes, sir.
I want to go swimming. Right now.
You have the address, Terry.
Right now.
Very good. All right. With no further questions, I will now open the public hearing. So if you wish to speak, please approach the podium. I will alternate between individuals physically present and those who have their hands raised on the Zoom platform. The public hearing is open. Does anyone like to speak?
The people.
Mr. Kesker.
No, sir.
Public hearing is closed.
Mayor Claffey,
Councilor Holmes.
I move the council adopt the ordinance and approve the amendment as recommended by the planning commission.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Mayor Claffey, I'll second that.
Motion has been seconded. Mr. Kesker.
Miss Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Miss Edwards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Right.
Which brings up public hearing number 5. This is why Leslie Beauregard left tonight, because she knew I was going to get her for 5 public hearings in one night. This is a public hearing in consideration of an ordinance to partially exempt from real estate taxation by classification or designation property located at 119, 1127, 1129, 1159, and 1177 Montgomery Avenue in the city of Staunton, Virginia, and proposed to be developed by Lily Gardens, Virginia LLC as Lily Gardens. Mr. Blair.
Well, this will be Mr. Rhodes' 3rd straight appearance, and there are 3 items to consider. So you might call him Rodney Cubed.
Oh.
Oh, you've been waiting for that. You planned that one ahead of time.
Oh my
Welcome back, Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you. Would it be appropriate for the mayor to also introduce item G and H?
It
since they
would be. It would be.
Okay,
A
and let me
threefer.
read, G is a consideration of a resolution to designation property located at 1119, 1127, 1129, 1159, and 1177 Montgomery Avenue as a revitalization area. And H is consideration of authorization of city manager to execute and deliver to Virginia Housing Development Authority a letter in support of allocation of tax credits to Lily Gardens, Virginia LLC. So F, G, and H are yours, Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you, Mayor Claffey. Lily Gardens, Virginia LLC proposes to develop a 48-unit apartment complex on Montgomery Avenue that will serve low and moderate income families. The site contains approximately 20 acres and is zone R3 medium density residential district conditional. I would note that multifamily apartments are allowed by right in this district with just administrative approval of a site plan, and that this proposal is well under the density limits in the R3 district conditional. This is before you tonight because the applicant is seeking federal tax credit for this project through Virginia Housing, and the developer requests the three items that the mayor mentioned: adopt a tax abatement ordinance, a revitalization area resolution, and a letter supporting an allocation of federal housing tax credits for this project. As far as the tax abatement, this would be for an abatement of $2,000 a year for a period of 3 years. The applicant notes that they are going to spend approximately $9 million in improving this property. And the city assessor has determined that this project could generate additional tax revenue of almost $82,000 per year. As far as the revitalization area resolution, the developer notes that the adoption of this resolution will make the application much more competitive. And I would note that all the properties located within a city's opportunity zone, the project area does not qualify for these revitalization area points unless council adopts a resolution. I would note that the need for affordable housing is noted in the city's comprehensive plan and the city's consolidated plan. And last, the applicant is requesting that you authorize the city manager to send a letter of support for the allocation of federal housing tax credits for this project. Staff recommends adoption of the proposed tax abatement ordinance and the proposed revitalization area resolution and execution and delivery to Virginia Housing of the proposed support letter. The need for low and moderate income housing has been well established in various city plans. The proposed tax abatement is insignificant in comparison to the expected investment and projected tax revenue. I'd be glad to take any questions you have at this time. Obviously, item F is a public hearing, and I would note that the contract purchaser of this property, Jen Serber, is participating on through the Zoom platform. She is also the one that is developing Middlebrook Trace 1 and 2, which is almost directly across the street from this project. It's an identical type of development.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Rhodes, just wondering, because it says, and forgive me if I'm not understanding this, but it says it's under the density limits. Does that mean there would still be an opportunity to have some infill there if Ms. Serber would like to add some additional?
That's a possibility, and that's what happened across the street, and that's why you have Middlebrook Trace 1 and 2. I think each of those are about 42 units, and they came in on 2 separate occasions to council in the past couple of years to get approval of that. Yeah, with 20 acres under the zoning, you could do theoretically 25 units per acre. from a practical standpoint, you have to provide parking, setbacks, open space.
Okay.
But yes,
Yeah.
there, and I'm not sure about the topography of this property, but there certainly is a possibility of additional units down the road.
Thank you.
Jerry?
Rodney, will they provide like curbs, streets and stuff like that for their area of sidewalks, or will that be part of the things that we do?
What happens on the site is up to the developer, and they must provide pedestrian access through the site. But along the city road, that's the city's responsibility.
I just didn't know because it shows that the thing going all the way out to Montgomery Avenue, or those, I guess those are already existing roads.
That's just a property that extends out there.
Oh, okay. Well, and will it be able to get in from Middlebrook Avenue also? Will you be able to come in through the back?
It looks like you would.
Lacey
but-
King.
Yeah.
Unless it's a drop off.
Or upset.
I drove,
Yeah.
actually, I drove that way. I drive that way quite often. And you can see that they had already started. So you'll be able to go in and out of that.
If you go out Stewart Street, you can see where they're working on.
Well, it'd just make it easier for people to get in and out because it would maybe help the
Mhm.
congestion,
On Montgomery Avenue, yeah.
or on Middlebrook too.
Or
I
on
mean.
Middlebrook.
Well, we have not received a conceptual plan for this,
Mm.
much less a site plan. And that certainly access would be addressed at that time.
Any other questions by council? Well, then I will open up the public hearing. If you wish to speak, please approach the podium. I will alternate between individuals physically present, those who have their hands raised via Zoom. Public hearing is open.
I would like to ask a question. My name is Kristen Maxwell. I live at 813 Churchville Avenue. And I did not walk into this meeting knowing that this was going to be considered, but I have a real interest in the provision of low and moderate income housing in the city of Staunton. And so I'm wondering if there are any kinds of conditions or requirements or anything that contained in anything either through Staunton or through the state in terms of setting rental rates on these units. It's more of a general question. I would like to see that we keep, some of these rental rates that are level that low and moderate income people can afford.
Rodney, any answer?
I do not have an answer, but I'm quite certain that the applicant who's online can answer that question.
Very good.
She talked about that before.
I'll be happy. Yes, sir. Would it be appropriate for me to speak now?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Ms. Maxwell, to address your question, yes, there are caps on both the rent levels and the income levels. This would be, these tax credits would be used to serve families in the income ranges of 30 to 80% of the area median income, making it a mixed income property. I do not have the rents in front of me right now. I do apologize for that, but the Internal Revenue Service allocates these credits to each state on a per capita basis, and then every state has an allocating agency, which through a competitive process, the credits are awarded to developers. And the Internal Revenue Service sets the rents that can be charged at maximum at each particular income level. Does that answer your question?
Question.
Yeah. Ms. Serber, could you just repeat that for me? I'm sorry. My name's Michelle Edwards. I was writing while you were speaking, and you said it caps at folks whose income is 30 to 80% of, and then I didn't get the average of the area's income.
Area median income, AMI, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So for the 80% rent levels, you could have a family of four earning, I think, up to $67,000. But for the 30% AMI folks, those would be more of your folks who waited on you for your coffee this morning or bagged your groceries at the grocery store. So, we have quite a range of incomes that we're serving.
Further questions?
I know. So would it be suffice to say that it's all workforce? It would be all workforce housing?
Yes, ma'am. It is workforce housing.
Ms. Serber, would these houses or condos or, I mean, apartments, would they be equipped with like refrigerators, washer, dryer, or any appliances? Or are they just?
No, of course. Every unit is equipped with Energy Star, refrigerators, stoves, ranges, dishwashers, trash compactors, and we do provide washer and dryer hookups in every unit, as well as communal laundry on every floor.
Any other questions about council? Mr. Kesker, do we have anybody online?
Yes, sir.
Tell them to go ahead.
Yes, this is Brenda Mead, 342 Sherwood Avenue. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I am 100% in support of the tax abatement for these properties, the revitalization zone, and writing a letter of support. I do have one question. During the work session, we learned that the city will need to spend $11 million in the next 5 years to meet the EPA requirements for stormwater runoff and TMDL requirements. Both of the properties on Middlebrook Road and Lacey King Drive will create a significantly higher amount of impervious surface and water runoff. They're at high elevations. I visited both properties. My question is, will the development be required to build retention ponds or other means to offset the amount of runoff that they will certainly generate? Lewis Creek is immediately below the Lily Gardens property. And I believe that we should consider what the impact, if we're not already considering that, what will be the impact on stormwater runoff and our TMDL requirements.
I'll turn the floor back over to Rodney Rhodes to answer that question.
Thank you. I gladly answer that question. As part of the site plan review and approval process, that is absolutely one thing that is reviewed by the one and only Pete Kessinger to make sure that there's no additional runoff from that site. So there would be some sort of stormwater requirement on site detention. Sometimes it's underground, sometimes it's, detention ponds, but that absolutely would be required. That's required for any development other than single family dwellings.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience wish to speak on this matter? Mr. Kester, anyone else on Zoom?
No, sir.
All right. And that public hearing is over. We have a motion with that.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Woods.
item F. I move that City Council pursuant to Virginia Code 58-1.1-3219.4, adopt the proposed ordinance partially exempting from real estate taxation property located at 1119, 1127, 1129, 1159, and 1177 Montgomery Avenue in the city of Staunton, Virginia, and proposed to be developed by Lily Gardens, Virginia LLC as Lily Gardens as presented.
Thank you. A motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Holmes, thank you. Mr. Kester.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Ms. Edwards,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Do we have a motion for G?
Mayor Claffey, I'm sorry. I move the city council pursuant to Virginia Code 36-55.30-2A, adopt the proposed resolution designating property located at 111, 1119, 1127, 1129, and 1159 and 1177 Montgomery Avenue as a revitalization area as presented.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Woods. Mr. Kester.
Ms. Edwards,
Aye.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And now we're on to H.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the city manager be authorized and directed to prepare and send to Virginia Housing a letter substantially in the form attached as Attachment 5, supporting the allocation of federal housing tax credits requested by the developer for the proposed development as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
A second. I'm sorry.
I'd like Terry to second that.
We're glad to have you both here seconded. All right,
I'll
thank you. Motion has been made and second. Mr. Kester.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Ms. Edwards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That ends the public hearing portion of our meeting. We're now on to number I, which is a consideration of ordinance to amend the fiscal year 2023 budget ordinance for the city of Staunton by adding budget amendment number 4. Mr. Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We will call back Ms. Moyers, our Chief Financial Officer, to present this item.
Welcome back.
Thank you. So budget amendment number 4 was introduced to you at the January 26th meeting. It did require a public hearing, which was properly advertised January 19th. The budget amendment totals $28,833,731. The city portion is $18,193,840. The school portion is $10,639,891. The budget amendment is to appropriate prior year fund balance carryover, insurance recoveries, grants and donations in the Gardner Spring Pump Station bond funds. I do want to point out that there was one line that was removed since its introduction, and that was the ESSER grant funds for the schools, because that was appropriated previously and did not need to be in this budget amendment. I was not going to read through the whole thing because it was introduced last time and I read through it line by line and then I followed up with an email, but I can read it if you don't have any questions.
I think we're okay.
Let me just ask if any members of council have any questions about it.
I don't. We got read thoroughly into it last time.
Yeah. Twice.
Terry, you get a chance.
No, I'm fine.
All right. All right. All finished? Is
Yes,
that all
I'm
you have?
finished.
I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2023 budget by adding budget amendment number 4, totaling $26,083,731.
Thank you. A motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Counselor Edwards. Mr. Kester, please call roll.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Ms. Edwards,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And that brings us to consideration of ordinance to appropriate an additional 25% of the fiscal year 2023 adopted budget. Mr. Blair.
Ms. Moyers will present this item, and I do want to remind you of just at the last meeting, this is probably going to be the last year we do this 25% based on COVID. So just to let you know, this might be the swan song. For that.
We will see, yes. So at the January 26th council meeting, I introduced you a request to appropriate the remaining 25% of the FY23 budget. In response to the uncertainty of the economy and the potential impact on the city's FY23 revenues, the city's budget was appropriated at a level of 75% to allow staff time to assess the impact of the lingering effects of the global pandemic on our local revenues. Revenues continue to perform well compared to prior year and are trending to exceed our FY23 budget requirements. We feel comfortable with appropriating the final 25% of the fiscal year 23 budget at this time, bringing the total FY23 adopted budget appropriation to 100%. This appropriation request is $35,546,376, and it did not require a public hearing as one was held during the budget process for the full budget amount. The city portion of the budget amendment is $24,666,812. The school portion of the budget appropriation is $10,879,564. A copy of the FY23 budget ordinance was provided in your agenda packet, and the city manager recommends the approval of this amendment as presented.
Questions from anyone on council? Ms. Moyers?
Just have one, actually. Right now, the parking fund is not taking in any money, is it?
It's taken in some. It does cover a portion of its debt service, but it is not fully sustainable. That is why we're hoping to do a parking study in the near future.
Don't do it in February. That's when we did the last one, and it's a horrible month to do a parking study. Now I have no other questions. I'm sorry.
Anyone else?
No.
I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor Claffey,
Vice Mayor Darby.
I move to adopt an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2023 budget by adding an additional 25% of the FY 2023 adopted budget in an amount equal to $35,546,376.
Thank you.
Second.
Woods is right on top of it. Very good. Must be the last one of the night. Let's get this done. Very good. We have a motion and a second. Mr. Kesker.
Ms. Edwards,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That was a lot of motions on it. All right, now matters from the city manager, Mr. Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Ms. Beauregard, who we do wish for a speedy recovery, did leave me with a few remarks. So first, voting is open until February 20th for USA Today's 10 Best contest. Staunton is in the running for Best Small Town Culture Scene. Search 10 Best USA Today in your favorite search engine and vote for Staunton under the category Best Small Town Culture Scene. Second, the city received a grant from the Virginia Risk Sharing Association to make improvements to the pedestrian crosswalk on Johnson Street from the Wharf parking lot to the Johnston Street parking garage. A flashing sign will be installed and an individual will push a button to cross the street. The lights will flash to let drivers know someone is crossing. It will be solar powered as well. If new paint is needed, that will be done once the weather warms up. This should be, pending all things go well, installed by the end of this month. Third, real estate assessments, as the mayor, as you noted during your remarks, have been mailed and received by property owners. And with an average total increase of 25.49%, there are many questions. Very briefly, assessments are driven by a variety of economic influences, which also determine sales prices. And for the past 2 years, properties have been selling for much more than pre-pandemic years. The high demand for, but limited supply of properties available for sale in the city of Staunton have also led to sales prices dramatically increasing. Same trends are occurring in Waynesboro, which is experiencing an average increase of 24.5% in our neighboring cities and most of the Commonwealth. So the city of Staunton is not alone by any means. And Staunton experienced similar trends in 2007 with an increase in assessments of 32.7%. If you have any questions about your assessment or would like to appeal it, please contact the city assessor's office at 540-332-3827. And finally, the fiscal year 24 budget process is in full swing. City Council has already met with the school board twice and has been discussing the 5-year capital improvement plan. As far as the operating budget, that will be presented by the city manager on March 23rd. That same night, there is a public hearing on the proposed tax rate. That is followed by budget work sessions on March 30th, April 6th, April 13th, and April 20th. Also on April 13th is a public hearing on the overall budget. And on April 27th, City Council is scheduled to consider and adopt their own budget. There are many ways to get involved and provide feedback. For more information on this, visit the city's webpage at ci.stanton.va.us or call the city manager's office at 540-332-3812. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, that brings us to matters from the public. At this time, we open the floor up for people to come and speak. I ask you a copy of the Staunton City Council's matters from the public rules are available in paper form at the clerk's desk or online at City of Staunton's webpage. You are asked to familiarize yourself with those rules before commenting. Please come to the podium, begin your call, identify yourself, complete your remarks within 5 minutes. Matters from the public is open. Welcome.
First of all, I want to thank the entire city council for your congeniality. Thank you for being respectful and for collaboration. Thank you, Terry Holmes, for giving your time and work to the people. Hard work to the people of Staunton. It's real greatly appreciated. So you probably wonder why I always have something to say. Well, tonight, I'm sorry to say that the reason is Tyree Nichols. There was an experiment at Yale by psychologist Stanley Milgram in 1961. The professor told the subject, who was paid, to shock the learner whenever he gave a wrong answer. The learner was gently restrained in the chair to prevent him from leaving. Unbeknownst to the subject, the learner only pretended to get shocked. The first shock was mild, but shocks got stronger with each wrong answer, and the learner acts more and more upset. The learner complains of real pain and asks that the experiment be stopped. The professor reassures the subject that everyone else had seen this through and the subject needs to continue. Finally, the learner is crying and screaming and begging and struggling to get away. The professor orders the subject to give one more shock. The subject knows that it will cause excruciating pain and possibly be fatal. The professor tells the subject, "You are doing nothing wrong," and reminds the subject, everyone else has done it. The experiment was conducted by hundreds of subjects. That is, hundreds of subjects shocked the learner. So how many people would do this? Of those people following orders, 65% continued to shock believing that they were actually causing pain. Evil is commonplace. The subjects were ordinary people, men 20 to 50 years old. These were not psychopaths. Tyree Nichols. What kind of people kicked him to death? Was that the accepted behavior of the Scorpion police officers? Who participated in the killing of millions in World War II? How many just followed orders? What happened to the indigenous people who lived in what we now call the United States of America? That was called divine destiny. Has the South resolved the suffering from the heritage of the Civil War? The opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference. When we say, we were just following orders, even when the evidence points otherwise, can we be manipulated to join and follow orders? Will our conscience guide us to do what is morally right? Thank you.
Mr. Kestner, anyone?
Yes, sir.
Please tell them to go ahead.
This is Brenda Mead, Sherwood Avenue. I'm very happy to hear about the improvements to pedestrian safety on Johnson Street, but I would like to remind you all that we still don't have safe crossing at Coulter and East Beverly Street for the Virginia School of the Deaf and Blind students and their teachers who are crossing at that intersection. I would also like to mention that, like many people, I was shocked to receive my property assessment increase. I think it was a missed opportunity for the city to communicate with citizens. It would have been so much, we would have, I think, received much less consternation from citizens if the actual assessment letter had gone out with a communication of some kind that would make sure people understood that it's up to city council to establish the tax rate. And my calculation is that in order to equalize at least my property tax assessment, you all would have to reduce the rate from 92 cents per hundred to 72 cents per hundred. And I think that's unlikely to happen. I also emailed Mr. Haney on Monday with questions about my assessment, and I have received no response. We are not communicating effectively with citizens. And I believe that we need a communications director in the city manager's office. I don't know why we are dragging our feet with that hire. I've said so many times that a communications director and community outreach is a critical function of our city manager's office. Thank you.
Ms. Lee?
Barbara Lee, 904 Lambert Street, Staunton, Virginia. I was listening to, I just came fresh off of what we lost in the city of Staunton. And I'm paying close attention to Uniontown, another Black neighborhood that I'm very concerned with, I'm concerned about. And I'm listening to all the money that's going to be funneled into from the federal government, $775,000 for dogs and cats, but yet we can't fund the money into a neighborhood. Now, we've been looking at this thing since 2018. This is 2023. We have some free money coming in here, but we're not, and I was listening to her report. Now, am I to understand that you have now put that funding into the city? Is that what I'm hearing? But you have taken it off the table, Uniontown.
No.
They're doing a study.
It's study the money.
But the $72,000 study, what does this study do? Do we look at blueprints? Do we look in the holes? What do we do with $72,000? And how long have we studied this? We keep dragging our feet.
I believe that they'll see how many units there will require water and sewer, and then also estimate how many more homes could be added with this study. You know, it's not going to be, it's basically going to just give us some idea of what kind of money we're going to have to spend. I think it was, did y'all say 1.3 million or something like that to do the water and sewer in that area?
5.2.
1.2?
No, 5.2.
5.2.
Yeah.
It's an increase in the water line. There's a way to do
Sewer.
gravity sewer as well through there. This has been going through the planning commission for years and years, you know, on that. And it's been working with the residents, and they have a very understandable reticence about, you know, anyone saying this is what we're going to do on it. And they told the planning commission that they wanted us to not rezone it all as residential because they felt it would raise their taxes. And so we didn't. We were about to change it to residential because all of it is industrial right now, which doesn't seem to make sense with a grid neighborhood there. But the residents did not want us to do that. And so we halted that process at their request at everyone at that meeting. And so we're trying to reach out more to the residents and find out exactly what they want to do with the land. Part of this study is part of that, because we need to understand better what they want to do, because otherwise, if they want it to stay as industrial, you don't put a residential type water system and sewer system in there. But if they want to build houses on it, then absolutely, that's what we want to do. And we've been pushing forward with that, but we're not going to do it against anybody's wishes. If anyone wants to opt out of zoning, you can when we're doing it. But if everyone is speaking in opposition to it, we definitely don't want to do that either. So we kind of ended up frozen in one place.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. And I just want to make one comment to fellow members of council, that this is a time for the citizens of the city to come and express their views, and we're not to participate in a give and take, because if we do it for one person, we have to do it for everyone.
That's
and
true.
I know there's opportunities for us.
Yeah.
There's opportunities for us to go down the, you know.
Harry started it.
No,
I did start it.
I
did
just say
start it.
we want to remember this.
I apologize. It's
That's
just been
all right.
something that I've
To
felt very
everybody.
strongly.
We're all
Just
involved.
Just a few months.
All right. So is there anyone else online?
No, sir.
Anyone else in the audience like to speak? I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and we went through a lot of business. We got a lot done. It was a great meeting. I want to thank everybody for all their attention, and have a nice Valentine's Day.
Yeah, thank you. You too.